Chapter 10-12. In a capital of mountains with mountains behind it and plains in front of it, there lived two lovely and lively little princesses. The two of them were very close and inseparable. No matter where they went, they would attract the attention and cheers of the people. Unfortunately, the good times did not last long. At the age of 14, the elder sister awakened as a witch. This was not a big deal. The reason why people could settle down in this dangerous place was inseparable from the help of witches. The problem was that the ability that the elder sister obtained was so strange. Not only did it not make her more beautiful, but it also ruined her originally beautiful face. Her ears gradually shrank, and the top of her head grew furry pointy ears. Her fingers grew longer and were covered with hair that was difficult to cut. Even her face was faintly not like that of a human. No one had ever seen such a witch. Even the court teachers were not sure if this was caused by awakening. I don't know who started it, but as the elder princess's condition did not improve, there was a saying in the palace that it was a curse. So I need to play the role of the elder sister? Lorgar could not help but touch her face. Fortunately, there was no short hair on her cheeks. But the great chieftain's description was a bit too scary. She had become like this because she repeatedly used her ability. If there was a tendency to become inhuman as soon as she awakened, it would be strange if she was not ostracized and hated by others. Maybe this part should be changed again? The wolf girl turned over, changed into a more comfortable position, and excitedly turned to the next page. Although the younger sister did not mind the change at all, the elder sister herself felt the power in her body growing. This power was so strong that it was almost difficult to control. In order not to hurt the younger sister, she deliberately distanced herself from her and locked herself in the depths of the palace. A crack appeared between the two of them who talked about everything. And this gap lasted for 4 years. Until the winter when the younger sister was 16 years old, an unforeseen event suddenly happened. A foreign prince came to the mountain city and said that he wanted to marry the little princess. His convoy was 5 miles away from the city. His subordinates respectfully called him the Lord of the World. His gold, silver, and jewels were more dazzling than the sun. His appearance made all the girls in the city unable to take their eyes off him. The king was very happy and held a grand banquet in the palace to entertain this distinguished guest from afar. All the nobles praised him, believing that if the little princess could marry such a person, she would definitely bring unparalleled wealth and prosperity to the mountain capital. I don't agree. At this moment, the eldest princess, who had not appeared for a long time, suddenly appeared in the banquet hall. She couldn't just sit by and watch her younger sister be taken away from her. However, the estrangement of 4 years made my sister hesitate. In her sadness and disappointment, her power finally went out of control. Not only did she sweep the hall into pieces, she even injured the foreign prince and escaped from the mountain capital. Ah! This idiot! Lorgar couldn't help holding her forehead. She couldn't become more familiar with her abilities the more she hid them. The eldest princess must have lacked practice. That's why she was so unfamiliar with her powers. If it were her, she would definitely ask her father to build a martial arts practice field and soak in it every day to spar with others. Only then could she truly grow up. Just like the 2nd year after her awakening, she could already hold a glass of water with her wolf-shaped arms without crushing it. At first, Lorgar only intended to skim through it, but when she reached this point, she found herself immersed in it and couldn't wait to know what happened next. After my sister left the capital, she released all the restraints on herself, and under the magic of the day of adulthood, she turned into a real giant wolf. At the same time, she also discovered the strangeness of the foreign prince. Even though it was winter, the long caravan did not leave any tracks. Even when night fell and the entire world was ruled by the bitter cold, there was not a single trace of light in the carriages. It was as if the people inside were not human. On the other hand, my sister also realized her mistake. The only thing she didn't want to lose in this world was her sister. With the help of her companions, a pigeon and a fish, she escaped from the palace and wanted to find the eldest princess. On the way, she ran into the prince who had caught up with her. Seeing that his attempts to dissuade her were futile, the prince no longer concealed himself. He tore off his disguise and revealed his true face, a sinister and cunning devil lord. He proudly explained the sequence of events. The City of Mountains is easy to defend, but difficult to attack. If the defense line can be opened from the inside, the demon army can take advantage of the situation and directly insert their blades into the core hinterland of the human population through the secret mountain passage in the city. At this moment, his subordinates were hiding in the phantom convoy, slowly passing through the wide open city gate. No matter how hard the humans struggled, it was already too late. Although my sister was taken away, the pigeon overheard this amazing news and told my sister. The eldest princess did not hesitate to turn around and kill her way back into the city that was in chaos. She helped the guards slowly recover from their disadvantage and finally led the people who were suddenly enlightened to attack the royal palace. The final battle finally broke out between the demon lord and the witches of Wolfheart. After a fierce battle, the eldest princess finally killed the enemy and saved her sister and the kingdom, but she also passed away because of her serious injuries. After the second princess took over the throne, she built a statue in the city to commemorate her sister. This touching story was also remembered by the world and passed down from generation to generation. Lorgar closed the script, rubbed her sore neck, and let out a long sigh. She felt a heartfelt satisfaction. There was no doubt that in the eyes of the chief, she was already an outstanding warrior. Not only did she protect her companions, but she also turned the tide and single-handedly saved the whole country. This kind of praise simply made her tail stand up. As for the ending of dying together with the enemy, she did not care at all. Dying on the battlefield was a kind of honor, and the stronger the enemy, the higher the honor. Of course, the main reason was that the eldest princess in the story was missing Miss Nana. But there were still a few points in the story that she could not understand. For example, why would the elder sister be so depressed because of her sister's marriage? At that time, the enemy had not revealed himself yet, so in the face of such an excellent marriage partner, shouldn't she be giving her blessing? And the demon lord, why couldn't he just directly take the second princess back? Why did he have to clearly explain his purpose, as if he was afraid that the other party would not understand? He was too careless. But who cares? Since she had promised the chief, she would seriously play the drama, no, the magic movie. As for the training, it would not be too late to do it half a month later. Chapter 10:13. 3 days later, the shooting of the Wolf Princess officially began. Roland had expected that this would be a very novel experience, but he did not expect it to be so interesting. On the first day of the project, it attracted the attention of all the members of the Witch Union. Even though they had never watched the movie, they could still imagine how wonderful the play would be based on the live rehearsal of the participants. Moreover, some of the actors were ancient witches. With the vivid description of their own experiences, the magic movie was even more attractive. If one were to conduct a survey among the witches, the answer would definitely be the dream world. They could not go to the dream world, but now they had the opportunity to see the play in that world, which was naturally very tempting. The next day, the people who ate, drank, and played cards from morning to night suddenly stopped. Instead, there were strong requests to join the filming, including Tilly. If he remembered correctly, this was the first time she had taken the initiative to make a request. Therefore, the crew had to temporarily replace several groups of actors. As long as it did not affect the daily production, Roland was happy to see them join. The participation of more witches also made the development of the play even more interesting. For example, the cameraman was changed from Amy to Lightning. In order to express the closeness of the sisters and their happy childhood life, the little girl slowly descended from the sky above Neverwinter, where the cold wind was howling. She had a panoramic view of the snow-covered city. Then she skimmed over the streets and passers-by, flew into the castle window with icicles hanging on it, and landed in front of the blazing fireplace. The contrast between the huge city and the small bedroom, the snow and the fire, the passers-by in a hurry and the laughing sisters, instantly outlined the two's closely connected inner world. Of course, it took Roland a lot of persuasion, and in the end, he even used his clumsy drawing skills to make everyone understand the meaning of the camera. At the same time, he noticed that May, who was standing beside him, had an indescribable light in her eyes when he explained the basic filming techniques on paper and pen. It was undeniable that the star of the Western region had a talent for drama that ordinary people did not have. She seemed to be able to construct a complete picture in her mind, and every person and thing on the stage could be used by her. This advantage was not obvious for a traditional play that was performed in a fixed area, but after changing to the language of the camera, it was as if she had found an excellent outlet. On the other hand, Irene, who played the role of the second princess, obviously did not have such talent. After that, all kinds of perspective changes became normal. It only took a few days for him to go from simple imitation to drawing inferences. Some of the techniques even had the flavor of modern movies. When the foreign prince appeared, she used the method of photographing him from parts to the whole. First, it was the boots embedded with jewels, then the golden cloak and brocade clothes, and finally the handsome smiling face. Then she extended the picture to the team of well-dressed attendants following behind, vividly reflecting the characteristics of the rich and powerful. By the way, the prince was played by her husband, Carter Lannis. Although Roland did not want to admit it, the well-groomed chief knight was indeed the face of Neverwinter. The use of the camera was only one of the aspects. What was even more amazing was the appearance of special effects. Basically, there would be new ideas popping up every day, and on this basis, incredible visual effects would be extended. For example, the three-dimensional background created by Soroya, which was enough to pass off as the real thing. For example, the special effects of lightning created by Sharon. Nightingale's mist fading, Molly's magic servant, Shadow's illusion doppelgangers. Maggie played two roles. When she was in the form of a pigeon, she was the sister's good friend. When she was in the form of a devil beast, she became the demon lord's right-hand man. In the snowfield, she fought with the wolf girl. The scene was so fierce that it could be described as the earth shaking, the mountains shaking, and the birds and beasts scattering. Of course, these special effects were inseparable from the support of Lotus and Honey. When the magic movie was halfway through filming, more than 300 people had participated in it. Not only the Witch Union, but also the Sleeping Spell and the Tequila survivors were also very interested. It was more like a carnival than a play. Standing on the city wall, Roland could not help but feel a little emotional as he looked at the lively crowd not far away. He did not expect that it would be a movie that would break the barrier between the three parties and shorten the distance between them. Before this, there had been a subtle difference between these three parties, like oil and water, which would gradually separate when they came together. But now, there was no obvious difference between them. No matter what kind of ability they had, they all used it on the same thing. There was no cold boundary between strong and weak, and there was no distinction between regions and factions. As long as they used their brains, they would definitely be able to find their own position. This kind of feeling invisibly diluted the differences between people, and also made the creation a link between people. For him, this was really a pleasant surprise. Roland exhaled a breath of white air and turned to look at Anna. "Don't you want to relax with them?" At first, Nightingale would only film when she needed to use her ability, but later, she completely enjoyed it. "I have to continue to be busy later." Anna stretched out her hand and showed the oil stains on her cuff. The size of the internal combustion engine parts on the drawing can't be used as a reference. I still need to adjust them. And... Roland blinked. "Staying with you is the best way to relax." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. The warm flames spread in all directions, dispelling the chill in the wind and snow. Roland also closed his mouth and enjoyed this quiet moment together with her. After a while, Anna said softly, "The future you promised has been realized." He followed her gaze. Not only were the witches from all over the world integrated with the play, but also the ordinary people in the crew. May was gesticulating as if she was teaching Lorgar and Carter how to act together in the previous scene. Irene was squatting by the side, happily combing Maggie's hair. Maggie squinted her eyes and seemed to be enjoying it. The new members of the troupe and the God's Punishment witches were setting up the props needed for the next scene. Compared with the clear division of labor in the factory, the interaction here was undoubtedly more natural and harmonious. It had nothing to do with their abilities. In the white snow that enveloped everything, they all became the same kind of people. No, there's still a part that hasn't been realized. Roland shook his head. Do you mean the other territories of Grey Castle? Those cities shouldn't be too far away. I'm not talking about the relationship between ordinary people and witches, but another promise, Roland replied with a smile. At first, I thought that we should be fully prepared and realize it step by step according to the process. But now I find that it doesn't matter whether we have it or not. The key is to do it. As for what the consequences will be, there will always be a solution. Just like this movie, because there are no procedures, it can bring more surprises. So this promise is. Anna raised her head and blinked her lake blue eyes. He seemed to be able to see the reflection of snowflakes on the slightly rippling lake. Chapter 10:14. Your Majesty, please reconsider. The City Hall director's wails could be heard outside the door before Roland could even see him. When Baron Herman ran to his desk, panting, Roland calmly put down the teacup in his hand. What's there to think about? The coronation ceremony? No, I mean, announce to all the territories that you'll marry a witch as your queen. The old chief steward wiped the sweat off his forehead and secretly glanced behind the king. This is really inappropriate, Your Majesty. After submitting the announcement to the City Hall, Roland knew that the news would definitely cause a stir, so he was not surprised by the other party's reaction. If he wanted to eliminate any obstacles, the first thing he needed to do was to unify the voices of the City Hall. He did not make this decision on a whim. After the end of the months of demons, the army of Neverwinter would once again enter the fertile plains to uproot the demons' last stronghold in Tequila. In addition to the spring plowing, new construction plans, and trade, the whole of Grey Castle would be very busy this year. According to the traditional rules, from the time of inviting guests to the time of the coronation, it would take about 2 to 3 months, and it would be even longer if the wedding was included. This was tantamount to lowering the productivity of the kingdom in a disguised way. It was fine to hold one during peacetime, but it was obviously not a good choice now. However, there was a rare tranquility this winter. This could not only stimulate the vitality of the subjects, but also did not need to make a big fuss. Most importantly, Roland hoped to fulfill this promise as soon as possible. Of course, as a feudal monarch with great authority, he was entirely capable of accomplishing all of this by himself. There were too many examples in history where, no matter how absurd the order or the seemingly impossible request was, it could become a reality under the will of the ruler. Moreover, this matter was far from exaggerated. However, since the framework of the City Hall was built by him, he would not personally dismantle it unless it was necessary. It was much more efficient to use power within the rules than to wantonly squander it. What's the reason? Roland knocked on the table and asked deliberately. Of course, the heir, Baron said anxiously. Witches can't give birth. This is something everyone knows, especially when the war is coming. If anything happens to you, the other nobles will become restless, and the people won't be able to rest easy. He gulped. If you just want to be with Lady Anna, you don't have to do this. You mean? You only need to marry a daughter of a minor noble, the steward advised. She can be used to shut everyone's mouths and show her face when necessary. As for how you treat her in the future, it doesn't matter. With this layer of cover, you can do whatever you want, so Anna can't get this title? Nightingale suddenly interrupted. Just because she's a witch? I think Lady Anna won't mind these superficial things. Baron coughed twice. If it's for the stability of the kingdom. If His Majesty can't speak, I can pass the message. You're not her, how do you know she won't mind? As far as this relationship is concerned, I bet she doesn't want to see a puppet involved in it. But this has nothing to do with feelings, it's about the heir. Enough. Roland raised his hand and said, after all, you just need to give the people under you a reasonable outlet, right? Baron was slightly taken aback. Isn't that the case? He pretended to be careless. After defeating the Pope, I took all of her lifespan, so I don't need anyone to inherit the throne. This is also the reason why I decided to marry Anna. Unfortunately, only a few people, including you, know about this. For those who don't understand magic power, if they don't see it with their own eyes, I'm afraid they won't believe it. Because of this, they need a psychological sustenance or outlet to appease their uneasiness. Am I right? Since the battle with the church in Coldwind Ridge, the higher-ups of City Hall more or less knew that he had passed a test called the Battle of Souls. The winner wins everything, and the loser loses everything. Although it sounded very unbelievable, the appearance of the ancient witches and the existence of the transfer of souls added a lot of credibility to this statement. And after he officially used this reason to convince Pasha and the others at the United Front meeting, everyone tacitly agreed to this statement. Yes, that's what I mean. Barav was completely unaware that he was falling into a trap. As long as there's a nominal heir, the voices of opposition will naturally subside. So I have a simpler way. Roland shrugged. A year ago, when we attacked Hermes, I accidentally found Gerald Wimbledon's lover, and this tavern maid was pregnant with his child. What? What did you say? The director suddenly widened his eyes. Are you sure that the child is Wimbledon's? Yes, his hair and eyes are both gray. He nodded and said, Why didn't you tell me at that time? If you knew, it's still unknown whether the mother and the child could still be alive now. Roland picked up the teacup and took a sip. What do you think? A ready-made outlet is more convenient than your idea, isn't it? An heir candidate who would never be able to ascend to the throne would provide plenty of topics to talk about, but at the same time, wouldn't pose any threat and could be replaced at any time. Seeing Barav's flickering eyes, Roland knew that Barav must have thought of all this. He didn't even need to do much. He only needed to announce to the people that there was such a person and then recall him back to Neverwinter. The rest would be filled in by the people's discussion and spread. If the mother is a tavern maid, this child can only be regarded as an illegitimate child. I must arrange a higher status for him, otherwise it will cause criticism. Also, it's better to keep this maid under control. Compared with nobles, they are indeed easier to control. Barav had already calculated in his mind. Roland could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. The scene in front of him seemed to have returned to 3 years ago, when he had just become the 4th Prince of Wimbledon. However, at that time, he had to spend a lot of effort to get Barav to follow his rhythm of thinking. Now, he only needed a few simple words. As long as it came out of his mouth, no one dared to question the authenticity of it, even if it was something like immortality. Go and make a plan. And when you're done with the enthronement, bring it to me for a look. He waved his hand and signaled Barav to leave. After Barav left, Roland heaved a sigh of relief. I didn't expect you to speak up for Anna. Sorry, I couldn't help. No, you don't have to apologize. You did nothing wrong. He could not help but look at Nightingale. He found that her expression was much calmer than he had expected. It's just that I thought you would what? Frowning and sad? Nightingale rolled her eyes at him. I thought you mentioned it too late. Of course, if it wasn't for Anna, I wouldn't have taken this step. Thinking of the relieved look on her face when she reappeared after disappearing for 2 days, Roland could only think that the change had something to do with the agreement between her and Anna. Chapter 10:15. Under the new administrative system, the news that the king was about to be crowned soon spread from the west to the north and caused a great uproar in various places. Unlike in the past, which relied on merchants and boatmen to deliver the news, City Hall posted announcements in the most eye-catching places in the cities and arranged for commentators to explain the news. It seemed that they intended to let the common people understand the royal family's decision. With such an official attitude, the news swept through the streets and alleys of the city in just a few days. No matter where one went, one could hear related discussions. It seemed that even the coldness of winter had faded a little. The underground trumpeter, in the old king city, was no exception. After all, taverns were always a gathering place for hot news. Sitting by the fire, drinking a glass of ale and talking about rumors that no one knew where, was one of the few ways of entertainment for the common people. As the new owner of the Trumpeter, Black Hammer had been grinning from ear to ear in recent days. After winter, the tavern's business was much quieter. However, after the news of the coronation, the tavern returned to its former liveliness. Seeing that the income was rising, Black Hammer was also in a good mood. It could be expected that the discussion would continue until His Majesty's coronation was officially completed and the dust settled. It was a wise decision to ascend the throne during the months of demons. If he could see His Majesty in person, he would not hesitate to bend down and sincerely kiss the tip of His Majesty's boots. After all, there was nothing more lovely than a golden dragon in the world. Of course, as former rats, the possibility of them being allowed to approach Roland Wimbledon was very small. It would be good enough if they could see Sir Theo. Black Hammer was quite self-aware about this. The current Theo was no longer the down-and-out patrol captain or the nameless bodyguard of Prince Roland. Ever since Timothy had failed in his bid for the throne, he had been showing signs of becoming the most powerful man in the Old King's City. In the past, Sir Nagy, the owner of the tavern, would not even look at a rat, but now he was sent to a remote place by Theo. Later, during the Black Street cleanup operation, it was also thanks to Theo's advice that they were able to shed their skeleton fingers' disguise and become official subjects. Incidentally, they also took over the underground Trumpeter Tavern. Black Hammer didn't dare to forget this favor of promotion. He planned to pay a visit to the Old King's City with the silver ring, the clay pot, and the little finger. Although it would cost him a lot of gold royals, as long as he maintained his relationship with the old king, he would be able to earn it back sooner or later. Apart from that, he did not forget what he was supposed to do. That was to collect information for Sir Theo, whether it was the bragging of a peddler or the sightings of a traveler on the road. As long as there was something of interest to Sir Theo, he must record it down and report it to the contact. And now, it was obvious that they needed to pay attention to those potential rebels. For example, the guest at table 6. Don't you think this is too much of a coincidence? A red-faced merchant shouted. Not only did His Majesty ascend the throne in such a hurry, but His Majesty just announced that he was going to marry a barren witch, and then he received the news that Prince Roland's widow is still alive and has given birth to a son. It doesn't make sense. His words were echoed by some people. I heard that Prince Gerald doesn't like women at all, and there's even a rumor that he had an affair with a young knight. How could he suddenly have a fiancée? Really? You're not from the King's City, so of course you don't know. Compared with the second and fourth princes, he rarely attends banquets. I can't be wrong about this. And think about it, the merchant said again. His Majesty only said that he would bring the two back to Neverwinter, but he didn't clarify the identity of the posthumous child. Isn't this deliberately leaving controversy and focusing everyone's attention on the right to inherit the throne? Which family does the woman come from, and whether her child has the bloodline of the Wimbledon family? These are enough to drag on for several years, but no one really cares about the real problem. What are you trying to say? What do you mean by the real problem? That's the witches. He gulped down a mouthful of wine. They secretly controlled His Majesty and created the so-called widow and child to distract our attention, so that they can control Grey Castle. The audience was in an uproar. Can witches make people? I tell you, there's nothing they can't make, the merchant said angrily. They can even make a stone floating on the water, let alone a person. It's because of these monsters that no one comes to rent my ship now. Of course, I'm afraid it's still impossible to make a flawless person now, so the witches need time. When they completely succeed, the child naturally won't be needed anymore. Haha. I think you've lost your mind. Do you think that His Majesty is the only one in the palace, and he only has a god's stone of retaliation with him? The crowd suddenly laughed, and the tavern was filled with a happy atmosphere. Ooh, burp, laugh as much as you want. Silver City's miners have been replaced by witches, and the river is full of Neverwinter's stone ships. Let's see if you can still laugh when it's your turn, the merchant said with a slurred tongue. Well, although the value of this information is not high, it's also a rebellion if you have the intention to rebel. Black Hammer picked up a charcoal pen and scribbled the characteristics of the other party on a piece of paper, as well as the words, slandering the royal family, malicious to witches, and stuffed it into an inconspicuous slit behind the wine cabinet. If there was no accident, the police would soon respond, and when the merchant went out, he would probably be caught red-handed. As for whether the other party was plotting a rebellion, it was the task of the interrogators, and had nothing to do with him. At the same time, in the Earl's mansion in the inner city. What do you think of this dress? Yorko put a high-necked tuxedo made of high-quality fabric in front of his chest and said, "Do I look too muscular?" The one who answered was Denise Peyton, a businesswoman whom he had met in King's City in the Kingdom of Dawn. She lazily leaned against the headboard and pulled up half of the quilt to cover her bare chest. "I've never seen you so enthusiastic even when we were dating. Now, you haven't even received an invitation, and you're already preparing to leave as soon as you hear the news? His Majesty and I have been friends for more than 10 years. Why would we need an invitation? That's just for show." Yorko shook his clothes. "You haven't answered my question yet. What do you think of this dress? To be honest, you're pretty much the same no matter what you wear." Denise yawned. "Anyway, it's not your appearance that attracts me. But if you're going to Neverwinter, what about me?" He hesitated. "If you want to have fun, maybe I can introduce you to some good." "I'm not interested," Denise interrupted him bluntly. "I prefer to choose my own targets. Besides, I came all the way from the City of Glow to see you. Is this how you treat your guests?" Yorko knew he was in the wrong, so he sighed and asked, "Then what do you want?" The businesswoman raised the corner of her mouth. "Take me to Neverwinter. I've long wanted to see what the king who turned the Kingdom of Dawn upside down looks like." "Well, since you've been friends for more than 10 years, His Majesty will definitely invite you to his banquet, right?" Denise lifted the quilt and got out of bed. She walked up to Yorko step by step. "When the time comes, you just need to take me with you as your partner. I've accompanied you to so many banquets in the City of Glow. This time, you have to fulfill my little wish, right?" She wrapped her arms around Yorko's neck and put her lips close to his ear. "Don't worry. I know you have someone you really want to see. Not only will I not interfere, but I might even help you." As the news spread, both the commoners and the new local officials became busy. However, the person at the center of the vortex was completely unaware of it. A week later, the shallow water gunboat Roland arrived at the city of Evernight in the northern region. Chapter 1016. Walking through the snow-covered alleys, Olivia felt her chest getting warmer as she listened to the crunching sound under her feet. Winter in the northern region was always the same. The sky was gray and gloomy, like a slab of stone over everyone's head. The earth was covered with white snow, and everything had lost its original color. Coupled with the cold and hunger, it was difficult for people not to feel bored in this monotonous scene. However, she saw a color that she had never seen before. The color was even brighter than a rainbow. Even in this season of howling wind and snow, it was as eye-catching as the stars in the sky. The closer she got to it, the more impatient she became. The end of the light pointed directly to her rented cottage. If it were not for her livelihood, she would not even want to leave it. That was her baby. The baby of her and Gerald Wimbledon. With him, she felt like she had the whole world. Thinking of this, Olivia could not help but quicken her pace. However, when she turned into the last alley, her heart suddenly clenched. There were more than 10 sets of footprints on the snow-white ground. Judging from their direction, they came from another alley and went straight to the entrance of the courtyard. Olivia was living in this courtyard for the time being. Her neighbors were all ordinary civilians. Even during spring and summer, there were few visitors, let alone during the months of demons. Why were there so many footprints? All of a sudden, Olivia felt dizzy, and an indescribable fear welled up in her heart. "No, calm down." She kept telling herself that maybe it was just a group of robbers or refugees. Outsiders might think that the situation was equally bad, but for her, it was her last hope. However, when she walked into the courtyard, trembling, she realized that even this glimmer of hope did not exist. The door of her rented house was full of patrolmen in soft armor. One of them was dressed like a knight. The badge on his chest indicated that he was from the Kant family, which ruled the northern region. No. Olivia did not know where she got her strength from. She dropped the milk cake that she had bought with great difficulty, lowered her head, and rushed to the door. At that moment, she was ready to be killed. As long as they pulled out their swords and stood in front of her, she would run into them. However, to her surprise, they seemed to be indifferent to her appearance. They just slightly stepped aside and let her directly rush into the house. Olivia tripped over the threshold. The cold ground tore her dress like a millstone, but the pain from her knees was insignificant. She crawled into the small bedroom with tears streaming down her face. She wanted to see her baby for the last time, but she did not see what she had expected. A blue-haired woman was sitting at the head of the bed, playing with her baby expressionlessly. The nanny who usually took care of the baby was standing aside with her head bowed respectfully, as if she was the nanny of the nanny. The woman raised her head and glanced at Olivia. With just one glance, Olivia understood that this woman was definitely not the same as her. Although she had an unforgettable appearance, she could not associate her with the common women. Gentle, delicate, charming, sensual. Those words that belonged to women did not fit her. Even though she was holding the baby, there was no maternal light in her eyes. Rather than saying that she was playing with a child, it would be more accurate to say that she was playing with a toy. "Nice to meet you," the woman said slowly. "My name is Edith Kant. You should have heard of me." The Pearl of the Northern Region. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She was the eldest daughter of Duke Kant, the legendary woman who could lead the knight in battle. There was no one in the northern region who didn't know the name of Pearl. Even Gerald had mentioned her many times. Some people even said that she was more difficult to deal with than the Duke himself. "Greetings, Your Excellency." Olivia swallowed, bent down, and touched her head to the door. "May I ask why you're here?" Edith waved her hand. The nanny immediately bowed and then left the bedroom, closing the door behind her. At this point, Olivia realized that the nanny she had found was arranged by the Kant family. They had long discovered the secret of the baby. To make a long story short, His Majesty asked me to bring the bloodline of the Wimbledon family back to Neverwinter. "And then, secretly execute him?" Olivia said with difficulty. "If you just want to erase his existence, you can do it anywhere. There's no need to waste so much effort." Edith untied the cloth on the baby's head, revealing his light gray hair. "His Majesty needs a reason to deceive people. That's all." Olivia was stunned. She really could not understand what Edith meant. "Your Excellency, I don't quite understand. It's not as complicated as you think." The Pearl of the Northern Region shrugged. "Have you ever heard of witches?" After listening to Edith's story, Olivia spent a long time trying to connect the two things together. The conclusion she got was even more unbelievable than the Arabian Nights. Roland Wimbledon is determined to marry a witch, so he wants to use Gerald's child to appease the public? She did not know much about the ways of the nobles, but her intuition told her that this method was too unreasonable. "Your Excellency, is it really necessary to do this?" She clenched her teeth and plucked up her courage. "Your Excellency, please forgive me. Perhaps His Majesty has this idea now, but it doesn't mean that he will in the future. If something happens, Sherlock will." "Sherlock? Is that the child's name?" Edith raised her eyebrows. "It seems that you still don't understand your situation. His Majesty's order is absolute. You only have two choices. You can take a sum of money and go far away and never ask about this matter again. Or you can go to Neverwinter with him, but you can't show up in the name of his mother. You have to be a servant of a noble family." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes again. Yes, her identity was too humble to become a member of the royal family. "Who will take care of him for me?" "No one." She suddenly raised her head and tears flowed down the corner of her mouth. "His Majesty isn't that unreasonable. If you choose the latter, except for changing your identity, everything else will be the same. You can still stay with him and watch him grow up. That noble family has been destroyed by the attack of the church, and Gerald's fiancée entrusted the child to you before she died. That's all the story." Edith paused. In addition, this news has already been announced in other territories, including the northern region. Just wait for 2 or 3 days and you'll hear the whole story. If he wants to kill you, why does he need to announce it so openly? Does the Pearl of the Northern Region mean that His Majesty did this mainly to make me feel at ease? Olivia pressed her hand against her chest. She could not help but recall the scene of that night. She had been driven into a corner, so she had found Roland, who was still Prince Roland at that time, and he had indeed helped her. Although he might have some ulterior motives, if it were not for this, she would have been beaten by the tavern owner. She took a deep breath, wiped her face, and stood up from the ground. Kneeling for such a long time made her legs numb, but she still managed to control her body. Your Excellency, may I ask, does this child have a chance to become a king? No. Edith's eyes flashed with a hint of interest. Before we set off, His Majesty specifically told you not to have any illusions. If there is no hope, there will be no disappointment. Of course, this is forbidden to spread. No, Your Excellency, I won't be disappointed. My biggest wish is for him to grow up safely. Olivia's voice became slower and slower, as if every word she said required all her strength. However, this still doesn't solve the problem of His Majesty's successor. If he changes his mind and decides to make a real crown prince, the latter will definitely see Xie Luo as a thorn in his side. At that time, I'm afraid he won't be able to survive. She looked straight into Edith's eyes and said word by word, I know I can't change anything, but if you can't give me a reasonable answer, please kill me here and now. Edith narrowed her eyes. It was the smell of bloodthirst. In front of Edith, Olivia was as weak as a lamb. Even so, Olivia still stuck out her chest and refused to give in. If not, this day will come sooner or later. I can't kill Gerald Wimbledon's child with my own hands, Your Excellency. Of course, there was no answer. Even if there was no need for Edith to tell a humble maid. That was all she could do. I'm sorry, Gerald. Olivia closed her eyes and waited for the cold blade to cut her throat. I'm sorry, my dear. The child woke up from his sleep and cried as if he had sensed the impending departure. Olivia tried her best to stop herself from opening her eyes. She was afraid that she would not be able to make the decision if she saw him again. However, the blow did not come. Edith chuckled. You can. Olivia looked at Edith in disbelief. Then the Pearl of the Northern Region opened her mouth and said the answer silently. It was an even more incredible answer, even beyond her imagination. But somehow, she believed Edith's words. Perhaps when one fell into a whirlpool, even a straw could be the last hope, let alone a drowning Olivia. Rather than being convinced by Edith, it was more accurate to say that she had convinced herself. Edith left the crying child to Olivia and turned to walk out of the door. We'll leave in 3 days. Prepare your luggage. Your Excellency. Olivia murmured as she passed by Edith. There's a tavern owner in Deep Valley Town and an unknown guard of His Highness Gerald. They may know about this. I'll handle it. Don't worry, Edith said without looking back. When the Pearl of the Northern Region left, Olivia hugged the child tightly, as if she was afraid that he would disappear. The child also calmed down and buried his head in her chest. In her heart, she could not help but ask herself, is it really possible? In the silent conversation, she clearly saw the answer that Edith had said. It was a simple phrase, but it had an enchanting power. Immortality. Chapter 10:17. When Edith returned to the castle, Carr and Duke were waiting for her in the hall. You'll only stay in the city of Evernight for 3 days? If I'm not mistaken, this task needs time to develop. You don't need to go back immediately. Why don't you stay a little longer? Edith frowned and asked, Father, did you send someone to eavesdrop on my conversation? If I asked you directly, would you tell me everything clearly? The Duke glared at her. I learned this trick from you. Instead of waiting for the answer, it's better to find it myself. Ha! The Pearl of the Northern Region could not help laughing. Congratulations. You've finally made some progress. Now I don't have to worry about you in Neverwinter. The Duke said grumpily, You haven't answered my question yet. Not only did you leave by yourself, but you also want to take Lance with you. Is that Wimbledon really that attractive to you? But he would rather marry a witch than marry into the Kant family. I really don't understand why he brought up Gerald's child. It seems that you have a lot of complaints about me not being able to ascend the throne. Edith squinted at him. Or, in fact, you only care about whether my unborn child can inherit the crown or not. I haven't forgotten what you said to me when Timothy came to the northern region. Don't think that I don't know what you've suggested to His Majesty. Calvin's imposing manner was immediately suppressed. I'm just thinking for your sake. Don't you feel that it's unfair to let that wild woman's seed be in the limelight like this? Edith sighed inwardly. She could not say that her father was lying. At least 80% of his words were sincere. However, as far as the result was concerned, it was not a good plan. Kant might be a good father, but as a lord in charge of a territory, his shortcomings were too obvious. Fortunately, the current generation of nobles in the northern region was not very good. In other words, most of the nobles were very poor. No wonder His Majesty did not want the noble system to continue. If she were the king, she would also not allow a group of idiots to waste her property. Because they were on the same level, she should comfort her father, but Edith just couldn't do it. She preferred to turn words into sharp blades, and it would be even better if they could bring pain and torture, whether to others or to herself. Wild woman? No, you're wrong, father. It's not a coincidence that Gerald Wimbledon likes her. That woman only lacks an identity. If she was born into a noble family in the northern region, she might be much more outstanding than you. As for my two younger brothers, they're not even worth mentioning. In fact, what you need to thank the most is the ancestors of the Kant family. If it weren't for their status as counts, they wouldn't even be able to compete with the ordinary merchants on the street, let alone climb to the position they have today. Just as she expected, her father's expression turned ugly for a moment. Even though she was reluctant at first, after she made up her mind, she immediately confessed those who might harm her. In this regard, that woman is quite decisive. If Gerald's child takes over the throne in the future, do you think she'll hurt me, who once forced her to do so? I think it's quite possible. Edith chuckled. As for the means, of course, she'll do it in a way to vent her hatred. After all, women know women best, don't they? Enough. I know I'm wrong. Carwin finally couldn't stand it anymore and raised his hands in surrender. Can you stop talking? Phew. Edith let out a long sigh of satisfaction. So he'll never inherit the throne. Even if His Majesty doesn't want to, I won't allow it. She flipped her long hair and walked to her father. Let's get back to business. I want to go back as soon as possible so that I won't fall behind too much. Neverwinter is changing rapidly. I've been away from the center of power for a long time after coming here for half a month. If it weren't for His Majesty's order, I wouldn't have come here at all. As for my third brother, I seem to have written in the letter that I'll send him to Neverwinter when he's an adult, but your memory is really bad. But if I send Lance away, the northern region won't have an heir. Edith interrupted. The title of nobility has now become a purely honorary title. If the younger generation is stupid, do you think they can really stand firm in City Hall? I'm taking him away for the future of the Kant family. There are too many new things to learn there. If you don't want to be eliminated, you have to integrate into it. The Duke was still a little hesitant. Didn't His Majesty say that there are terrible enemies in the barbarian land? Haven't you ever considered what we'll do if Neverwinter is conquered? It's very simple. At that time, even if you have a dozen heirs, it'll be meaningless. She spread out her hands easily. And we should thank the demons. Which? Carwin said in surprise. I have a vague feeling that if there were no demons, His Majesty would have turned the 4 kingdoms upside down. The Pearl of the Northern region curled her lips. The current stability is just to fight against the demons, but the day of upheaval will come sooner or later. So in the final analysis, it's not wrong to say that the demons have bought time for us. There's only one chance like this. You should know what to do, right? The Duke was silent for a long time before he sighed. Give preferential treatment to the teachers sent by Neverwinter, open more primary education classes, send more people to study in the Western region, and listen to the advice of the City Hall officials. You've mentioned it many times in your letter. My memory isn't that bad. That's good. Edith patted her father on the shoulder and then walked upstairs. I'm going to catch up on my sleep. I still have work to do tonight. Wait. Carwin turned around and stopped her. Wild girl. I'm also very curious about Olivia's last question. How did you answer it? Instead of waiting for the answer, it's better to find it out myself, Edith said with a smile. You've made progress just now. Now please keep it up. Hey, that was just a casual remark. Did you deliberately not make a sound? The Duke opened his mouth wide as if he had realized something. You deliberately led me to say that just to shut me up? All right, I won't send anyone to eavesdrop anymore. Now you can tell me, right? My dear daughter. Don't take it to heart, father, because it's not important at all. She paused for a moment. I hope it's true, but unfortunately. Unfortunately what? Carwin asked. Chapter 10:18. In the city of Neverwinter, Grey Castle. Ever since the news of the coronation ceremony was announced, Roland had handed over all the preparations to Barav. Barav seemed to be particularly diligent. Not only was he busy every day, but he had also invited Lady Blanche, the ceremonial officer of the Old King's City, to Neverwinter. Obviously, he did not want to make any mistakes. As for Roland himself, apart from occasionally checking the progress of the magic movie, he spent the rest of his time finalizing the internal combustion engine. Since there was a certain error in the weights and measures of the two worlds, the prototype had to pass the stability test. Moreover, the fractionated oil was uneven, so he had to take into account the redundancy of the design. Since he did not have the means of simulating the real world, he could only make adjustments with the real thing. From manufacturing, to experimenting, to scrapping, to improving, and to repeating. Roland felt like he had returned to his school days. Every day, he would travel between the castle and the back mountain of the North Slope, living a busy and fulfilling life of research. The knowledge that he had not touched for a long time became vivid again in the past half a month. Of course, he did not have Anna to accompany him at that time. What was more wonderful was that she was as enthusiastic about new things as he was. Every time he saw her concentrating on assembling the precise parts and wiping the sweat from the tip of her nose, Roland could not help but sigh with emotion. Her desire for creation and knowledge seemed to be innate, just like her flame, scorching and pure. This inner spirit was beyond the scope of what could be described by her appearance. He would never get tired of looking at her. Every time she made a decisive progress, the smile on Anna's face could almost be described as the blossoming of all flowers. Roland even felt that the joy of creation was far greater for her than being a queen. She had never concealed her thoughts. As long as they could stay together, she did not care too much about the false reputation. Of course, Roland also knew that sometimes the reputation was not for the sake of the other party, but for the sake of the public. As long as human beings were social animals, this was inevitable. After marking a series of revised measurements on the blueprint, Roland put down the quill and rubbed his sore neck. If there were no accidents, the design drawings in front of him were likely to be finalized. After all, the previous batch of prototypes had been running steadily for several days, and the accumulated working time was enough to meet the current needs. As the second-generation power source, the principle of the internal combustion engine was not complicated. It could be regarded as the evolved version of the steam engine. The first generation of power source used steam to push the piston. No matter how ingenious the design was, it was impossible to avoid the energy loss caused by the transmission of steam. Therefore, people naturally thought of putting this power directly into the cylinder, which would certainly greatly improve the work efficiency. That was how the internal combustion engine came into being. After mixing the oil with air, it would be injected into the cylinder, causing it to burn intensely. The expanded airflow would push the piston, and at the same time, the new fuel would be sucked into the cylinder. It sounded simple, but it was a huge project to implement. For example, steam engines had very low requirements for sealing. The gap between the piston and the cylinder block of the early products could even be stuffed with a finger. Felt and linen could be used to plug the gap. However, it was obviously not feasible for internal combustion engines. Unlike steam engines, which were powered by external forces, the piston had to complete each cycle by itself. Therefore, if the seal was not tight, the cylinder would stop due to lack of fire. In other words, only when the level of materials and processing technology reached a certain level could this simple principle be turned into reality. That was why the first internal combustion engine in history was actually decades later than the electric motor. The first-generation internal combustion engine designed by Roland had a total of 2 directions. One was the cylinder inline type, and the other was the cylinder annular type. The former was stupid and thick, and it was made of cast iron. It was as stable as possible, and it could be put into the factory for large-scale production. The latter was also known as the star engine. Because the crankshaft was short and the structure was compact, it could be made very small, and it was very suitable for spacecraft. Overall, it was much more delicate than the former. It was made of aluminum alloy, and for the time being, only Anna was responsible for the processing. The reason why Roland dared to develop these 2 products at the research and development stage was nothing more than standing on the shoulders of his predecessors. He could find a lot of information about these 2 time-tested products in the dream world. Compared with the steam engine, which had gone through 4 generations, the starting point this time was much higher. Coupled with the information revealed by the senior demon, he had to speed up his pace. It was very difficult to defend the ground against a large number of threats from the sky, which had been proved by the expedition this time. If the plan could be realized, human beings would be qualified to compete with their enemies in the sky for the first time. "Your Majesty, don't move," Nightingale suddenly said. Roland immediately stopped and looked back. "Is there an enemy?" Then he saw Nightingale come up to him and touch his head. He felt a slight pain as she put a strand of hair in front of him. This is white hair?" Roland did not know whether he should laugh or cry. Although the color of gray hair was very light, these strands of hair were a little white, almost losing their luster from the roots. "And?" Nightingale touched his hair for a while. "Have you had too little rest recently?" "Have I? You used to sleep late in the winter. Recently, you get up earlier than me and enter the dream world at night. That can't be considered as real sleep, right?" She talked incessantly. Yawning from time to time is a sign of fatigue. You're not even 30 years old, and your hair is already white. How can you continue like this? Looking at Nightingale's serious reprimand, Roland could not help feeling much lighter, and even his fatigue from work faded a little. As expected, she was not affected too much. It seemed that the agreement had played a crucial role. "Don't worry. This is far from the limit. I've experienced it before." Nightingale looked doubtful, but she could tell that it was not a lie. Because he was not lying. Generally speaking, there will be a long period of palpitations, as if the chest is particularly empty. Then you will feel weak all over. You have to be careful at this time. If the reaction is strong, you will cough incessantly and even bleed. Cough, cough, cough. Halfway through, he suddenly coughed violently. "Hey, are you okay?" Nightingale suddenly looked nervous. She patted his back and said, "Do you need me to call Nana?" Roland took a deep breath and said, "No. I'm fine. I just choked on my saliva." "Really? Don't worry, He turned his head and could not help but freeze for a moment. The distance between them was so close that they were almost touching. When their eyes met, both of them could not help but hold their breaths. "Your Majesty." Just then, the office door was pushed open and Vendi walked in. "I have something too." "What are you doing?" "Me." Roland blinked and found that there was no one in front of him. He was half leaning back, and even without saying, he knew that it must be quite strange. His Majesty is practicing gymnastics. Nightingale was lying on the coffee table, leisurely chewing dried fish. It's easy to get sore after sitting for a long time. He can try the effect first. "I see," Vendi said thoughtfully. "Is this the gymnastics that you mentioned before that you're going to promote in the academy?" But, is it really effective to put it like this? Oh, it's okay. Roland awkwardly returned to his original position. He did not know why, but he felt that the innocent nightingale was trying to hold back her laughter. By the way, what do you want to say? Chapter 10:19. In terms of magic power, adulthood always came at midnight. This was one of the unsolved mysteries of witches. Magic power was everywhere, but why was it the most active at this time? Even for a witch like Anna, after her magic power was depleted, she would be able to recover 70 to 80% in the first 2 to 4 hours after midnight. If she were to rely on her natural recovery during the day, she would probably not be able to recover even after a week. Most witches did not care about this, and even the tequila survivors were no exception. When Roland asked them about this, the answer he got was, "Isn't a new day supposed to be like this?" In most people's eyes, time was divided into days, and the magic power of a day was spent on a day. It seemed reasonable that there would be a new atmosphere every day. However, Roland knew that the date was not a natural concept, but was created by people for the convenience of life. That was why there was the equinox and the precession of the equinox. In order to correct this error, the leap month was invented, and as time became more precise, the leap second, that is, the last minute has 59 or 61 seconds, whatever was convenient. Therefore, it was a little strange that witches always solidified their magic power at a specific time. It was like every awakened had a biological clock in their body, and they could keep it in sync at any time. No matter when she was born, whether she was in the southernmost region or the Hermes Plateau, they were all connected. Unfortunately, without any observation tools, it was difficult to study magic power or accurately measure time at this stage. He could only use this phenomenon as an empirical theory. "Your Majesty," Vendi's words pulled him back from his thoughts. "In addition to the above measures, do you have anything else to add?" The so-called measures were mainly designed to deal with the possible dangers during the solidification of their magic power. Since the scene of Lucia's day of adulthood, this step had been included in the witch union's consideration. Regarding this point, even the tequila could not provide many useful suggestions. "Do as you say." Roland thought for a moment. "By the way, don't forget to inform Marjorie and Sandy Osaka. I think they must also want to see Lightning reach adulthood safely." Vendi was a little surprised. "Madame Marjorie is fine, but that Mr. Flying Bird, he'll be fine," Roland said gently. "Yes, I understand." Seeing him like this, Vendi didn't ask any more questions and quickly agreed. At night, the top floor of the witch building was brightly lit. This place had been transformed into a special bedroom for the adult witches. The room was made up of 2 normal rooms connected together so that it could accommodate more companions. One of the walls had also been transformed into a sliding door structure. In case they needed to release their magic power, they could directly pull open the 2 panels of the door instead of blasting open the outer wall like last time. Lying on the soft bed, Lightning appeared particularly excited. Her behavior was the complete opposite of Lucia's. It seemed that she had been looking forward to this day for a long time. A wooden platform was placed beside the bed. Her left hand was tied to it while her right hand held the sigil of God's will. According to the experience gained from Lucia, as long as she felt a constricting pain in her body, she could pour all her magic power into the sigil. Tying one hand was to prevent the witch from losing control of herself due to the intense pain and accidentally pointing the sigil at others. After eliminating this risk, Countess Spear's absence was not a big problem. Meanwhile, Lightning was surrounded by her friends who had come to visit. "What kind of derivative ability will I awaken? If only I could solve the problem of carrying weight. Then I could bring a lot of food and tools and fly all over the land of dawn." Similar topics almost lasted for the whole night. Her eyes blinked as she listed one possibility after another. She looked very much like Roland when he was a child, guessing what kind of birthday present his family would give him. Of course, most of them ended in disappointment. For example, he longed for a big transformer, but in the end, he got a book of 300 exercises. "It's also possible that there's nothing," Mystery Moon muttered. "It's not that easy to obtain derivative abilities." No matter how I look at it, there are only a few people in Neverwinter who have this talent. After this sentence, Roland seemed to hear a faintly discernible nasal sound, and the rising tone at the end was full of pride. How can you talk like that? Lily glared at her. In fact, what Mystery Moon said is not wrong, Agatha said with a smile. The Union has done statistics, and only 1 out of 100 witches can awaken a derivative ability when they reach adulthood. But compared to advancing to a higher level, this is nothing. After all, the most important thing for a witch is her main ability, which has unlimited potential. So you don't have to worry too much about it. Just focus on the solidification of your ability. By the way, weren't you doing an analysis of the adult evolution? Scroll interrupted. What's the result? That can only be used as a reference. After all, there are not enough examples to verify it. Vendi took out the record book and looked at it. But Lightning's score is really high. What's that? Andrea asked curiously. An evaluation method, Agatha explained. It's also inspired by Lucia. Because the surge of magic during the solidification of adulthood is very obvious. In theory, it is indeed easier to condense. So we made a preliminary evaluation based on the state of all the senior witches when they were promoted. We scored them according to the total amount of magic, subject score, ability control, and individual will. Of course, it's still at the stage of conjecture. Subject score. Do you mean the exam results? Yes, and it accounts for the most part in the formula. I see. It seems that someone will never be able to become a transcendent in this life. Andrea glanced at Ashes with pity. The latter shrugged disapprovingly. It's really crazy. Roland suddenly heard Phyllis sigh. What's wrong? He tilted his head and looked at her. In the tequila era, the promotion of a senior witch was a very sacred thing for every witch. Everyone was eager to get the favor of the gods, but they never dared to talk about it in public. Because it was too far away. If anyone announced that they would be promoted, they would definitely be laughed at by others. But now, Phyllis murmured halfway and seemed to come to her senses. Sorry, I'm not saying it's not good, but the contrast between the two makes me feel. I know what you mean. Roland chuckled. It's like a businessman who, after a nap, finds that the golden dragon he has accumulated all his life is no longer precious. It's always hard to adapt. I'm really not as good as Lady Agatha in this regard, Phyllis whispered. She only came here 1 year earlier than me, but now she has already led a new round of research on senior awakenings. She's indeed a genius of the Union. In fact, it's not difficult to understand. If the future generations are not stronger than the predecessors, how can we make progress? He said frankly. As long as we are still moving forward, this kind of scene will continue to reappear. When you see them, you will feel that this is hope, right? Phyllis followed his line of sight and also moved her eyes to the girl on the bed. But it's always better to have more abilities, isn't it? Lightning said confidently. I feel that not only will I be able to condense magic, but I will also be able to obtain several branches of abilities, because the most outstanding explorer will definitely get the most generous rewards. Goo! Maggie, who was standing beside the bed, also raised her arms as if to support the other party. There's no such logic at all. Mystery Moon shouted. The room suddenly became noisy. Looking at the lively scene in front of him, Roland smiled and shook his head, then walked out of the room. Why, don't you go in and have a look? After closing the door, he said to a man standing in the corridor, leaning against the wall. Chapter 10:20. The explorer was still dressed like a libertine, with feathers all over his body and an eye patch embroidered with rose petals on his right eye. It was hard to associate him with thunder just by looking at his makeup, but somehow, Roland felt that he was a little different from how he looked at the banquet. When pretending to be someone, you need to put your heart and soul into it. You even have to think that you are that person in order to deceive others. This was the first thing she taught me when I was learning how to disguise myself. Thunder took a puff of his pipe. The faint red light of the pipe looked like a looming firefly in the dark corridor. Your Majesty, I'm afraid I can't concentrate on pretending to be Sandy Asuka now. She'll see through me. So this is where the strange feeling came from, Roland thought. Because of the certain danger of adulthood, he could no longer pretend to be an unrelated outsider and indifferent to his daughter. If he cared, he would not be Sandy Asuka. Do you want to keep hiding it like this? Roland raised his eyebrows. You should have heard what Lightning said just now. She's destined to walk the path of an explorer. This question made Thunder silent for a long time. It was so long that Roland thought he would not answer. Then he said, Your Majesty, do you believe in fate? For a moment, Roland had some doubts about Thunder's identity as an explorer. Wasn't this the classic opening gesture of preaching? Of course, similar questions were common in love letters from high school students. However, it was clear that the other party was not here to seek answers. Someone once told me that the excellent would often die at what they were best at, and to make up for it, the heavens would always bestow such people with unparalleled talent. This is fate, a path that seems to have been predestined. Because of their extraordinary talent, they would be lured away and eventually fall. On the other hand, ordinary people with ordinary abilities would usually live longer. Who said that? Roland could not help but ask. Sandy, the person who introduced me to the path of an explorer. Thunder took a puff of his pipe. Wait, is there really such an explorer in the fjords? Aren't you afraid that Lightning might have heard of his name? He's been dead for many years. He was unknown when he was alive, and he's still the same after his death. According to the standards of the fjords, he can't even be regarded as a real explorer. Surrounded by the smoke, Thunder's figure almost merged with the shadows on the wall. Until the time of his death, he couldn't find a new island or a route that hadn't been marked on the nautical chart. Sandy doesn't care about his fame. He says that exploration is a kind of pleasure in itself. There's nothing wrong with lacking talent. At least you don't have to worry about whether you'll die young. Roland seemed to realize something. Then how did he die? You died to save me. Thunder said slowly. The ship was attacked by sea ghosts. When Sandy dragged me back to the cabin, I was clawed. The wound wasn't big, but the herbs didn't work. His flesh quickly decayed, and 3 days later he stopped breathing. At that time, he told me that he still died doing what he was good at. He didn't have any other good points in his life. The only thing he was good at was his kindness. Roland suddenly found that he didn't know what to say. After Lightning was born, she showed an outstanding talent for exploration. Whether it was identifying the route or drawing the nautical chart, her learning speed was much faster than the average person. When Thunder said these words, the expression on his face became extremely complicated. When I learned that she had awakened as a witch, my worry rose to the peak. You should know what this ability means to an explorer. Indeed, if courage, curiosity, and the desire for knowledge were still hidden human nature, and anyone could stimulate them, then having magic power could only be said to be a gift from God. That's why I made this decision. Thunder raised his head, and the light in his eyes seemed to reflect the red light in the pipe. If fate is difficult to avoid, maybe I can cut it off in another way. If I can hurry up and unveil those unknown places before Lightning officially embarks on the path of an explorer, the chances of her encountering danger will be greatly reduced. Apart from the territories occupied by the demons, the only places that have yet to be set foot on by humans are the eastern Sealine and the precipice continent seen in the Shadow Waters ruins. When you defeat the demons, I should be able to draw a map of these two places. But before that, it's better for me to act alone. If there was no place to explore, naturally there would be no risk. This answer made Roland couldn't help but be moved. Although the world might be far larger than he imagined, to be able to have such an idea in this era was not something that could be summed up by the word courage alone. Gravity firmly fixed everyone on the ground, but it couldn't restrict the thoughts of some crazy people. And Thunder was obviously one of the best. Flying was not only the exclusive right of witches. I understand what you mean. Roland raised the corner of his mouth. Don't worry, I promise that after the battle of divine will, you'll get a safe and sound lightning. I'll leave everything to you, your majesty. Thunder put his hand on his chest. At this moment, A sudden exclamation came from the room. Roland nodded to the other party and turned back to the bedroom. One side of the wall had been pushed open, but he didn't hear the sound of the sigil of gods while being activated. "Your Majesty," Vendi said excitedly, "Lighten, or her magic power has been condensed. Another witch who would be promoted on the day of adulthood." He could see the obvious excitement in the eyes of Agatha and Wendy, which meant that their research was indeed feasible. "Really?" Roland walked to the bedside and looked at the eager girl. "Do you feel any discomfort?" "Not at all." Lightning patted her chest and said, "I feel full of strength. It's a pity that I can't release my divine will. Lighting up the fourth magic stone is my limit." "That's good." Roland let out a long sigh. "Then have a good rest today and tomorrow. Your Majesty, I want to try now." "Can I?" Lightning jumped off the bed. "I seem to hear it calling me, and I can't help but want to fly immediately." "Is it referring to magic power?" Roland could not help but laugh. She was indeed the most energetic one in the Witch Union. Since she had said so much, there was no reason for him not to agree. "Take Maggie with you. Don't fly too far." "Yes." One side of the wall was still half open. Maggie turned into a pigeon and landed on top of Lightning's head. She then pressed the pigeon with both hands and flew out of the room, disappearing into the cold night sky. "I don't know how her ability will perform after she condenses it," Vendi murmured as she looked at the night sky. "Tomorrow will be busy again. Please let me use the 5-colored stone to observe her during the test," Phyllis added. "Anyway, let's call it a day and wait until tomorrow." Just as Roland was halfway through his words, a thunderous explosion suddenly came from the sky. The sound was so strong that it seemed to be real. The snow on the eaves was shaken into a white mist, and ice chunks fell like raindrops. The glass windows of the castle also cracked as if they had been brushed by an invisible giant hand. Chapter 1021. Like Lucia's day of adulthood, Lightning's promotion was gratifying, but it also brought some trouble to Roland. Was there anyone injured in the residential area last night? The next day, after listening to Barev's report, Roland could not help but raise his eyebrows. "Yes, Your Majesty." The voice of the other party came from the other side of the phone. An unlucky guy was going to the toilet, but he was startled by the explosion and broke his leg. 2 other guys rolled down from their beds and hit their heads. Early in the morning, a large group of panicked subjects came to the city hall and asked if Neverwinter had been attacked by demons or demonic beasts. It took the servants a lot of effort to persuade them to leave. "Your Majesty, can you tell me before something like this happens in the future?" Even through the phone, Roland could imagine Barev's plaintive look. Perhaps the old director was also scared out of his wits and waited for dawn the whole night. "How are the injured now?" "They've all been sent to the hospital. Their lives are not a problem, but the subjects are still talking about it. There are still people guarding the bulletin board in the central square, waiting for the announcement. This must be caused by the witch's ability, right? If you had informed me in advance, I wouldn't have bothered you with such trivial matters." "I see. But things related to magic power are unpredictable. It's not that I don't trust you." Roland comforted him. "Just say on the announcement that I'm developing a new weapon and there will be similar incidents in the future. Don't panic. If there is an enemy attack, follow the alarm. By the way, City Hall will pay for the injured people's medical expenses." "Yes." "Your Majesty," Barev said aggrievedly. Roland shook his head helplessly and then hung up the phone. Roland did not know why the old director had become more and more clingy recently. Although he handled the government affairs well, the tone of "Your Majesty, I've dedicated all my light and warmth to you, you can't let me down," still gave him goosebumps. On the contrary, the conversation with the Pearl of the Northern region was much more pleasant. Roland did not know where she was now. Putting aside his distracting thoughts, he looked at Lightning, who was standing in front of his desk with her head down. He asked with a faint smile, "You should have heard what I just said, right?" "Woo." The little girl said dejectedly, "Your Majesty, I was wrong. Please punish me by doing 2 sets of exercises." Roland looked at Maggie, who was above her head. Maggie looked away with difficulty and pretended that it had nothing to do with her. Although the members of the exploration group were very close, Maggie chose to remain silent in the face of the comprehensive exercises. He finally could not help but laugh out loud. "Ha! All right, raise your head. This is not your fault. After all, I was the one who agreed to let you fly. I should be the one to take responsibility." Really? Lightning suddenly raised her head, her eyes sparkling. "Of course, you don't know that doing so will cause damage. Plus, the loss won't be big, so you can skip the exercises." As the flight route was in the direction of the impassable mountain range, her impact on the residential area was very limited. Except for the cracked windows of the castle and the Foreign Affairs building, the other buildings were basically intact. When passing above the furnace area, Lightning had climbed to a certain height, and her impact was further reduced. It was difficult for her to cause any more damage. "Your Majesty, you're really great." She seemed to have recovered all her energy in an instant. Maggie also spread her wings in relief. Seeing that the bird and the human were about to pounce on him, Roland quickly raised his hand to stop them. "But does flying at such a high speed really consume so much magic power? You flew for less than 15 minutes yesterday, right?" Hearing this, Lightning suddenly felt a little embarrassed and said, "I was also very surprised. At that time, I wanted to save some magic power for testing, but I tried to speed up a little to see where the limit was. I didn't expect that my magic power would be consumed so quickly, and I almost fell from the sky." "Can you still go faster?" Vendi, who was taking notes at the side, immediately caught the key point. "Yes," Lightning said confidently, "as long as there's enough magic power. At that time, even the sound of the wind in my ears disappeared, and I even felt that nothing could stop me from continuing to sprint." "What about Maggie? Was she squatting on top of your head?" "Coo!" Before Lightning could answer, Maggie had already turned in a circle. "Too fast, dizzy in my arms, coo." Is she saying that I felt uncomfortable flying too fast, so I was carried in her arms? Roland found that his ability to understand pigeon language had greatly improved, and he could now automatically fill in the gaps in the middle of the sentence. "Just dizzy?" Another witch in charge of the ability test, Agatha, said, "You didn't feel any change in the airflow." "Well." Lightning thought for a moment and said, "Although I was wearing a pair of goggles at that time, the wind seemed to have suddenly disappeared halfway through the flight. What do you think?" Roland looked at the ice witch and asked, "Is there any record of such a derivative ability in the Union?" Although Lightning had accidentally consumed most of her magic power, causing the ability test to be temporarily put on hold, the Witch Union had now established a set of systematic evaluation procedures. Coupled with the inherited experience of the Union, even if they did not use their ability, they could still make a general judgment through questioning and the examination of the stone of measuring. According to Lightning, she only took about 3 minutes to cross the impassable mountain range and fly into the barbarian land, a distance that usually took about half an hour. The sound of thunder in the night sky could also prove this. After her evolution, she was qualified to chase after sound. As for the concept of the sound barrier, Roland did not waste time explaining. Agatha's learning ability had always been outstanding among the witches, and she understood the cause of the thunder with a little explanation. Although there were many creatures in the natural world that could reach the speed of sound in a short time, and human beings also faced the challenge of the speed of sound with their flesh and blood under special circumstances, it did not mean that this process was easy to achieve. There was no doubt that the reason why Lightning was not affected in the slightest must have something to do with her newly awakened derivative ability. "I think it should be magic resonance." Agatha pondered for a moment and said, "This kind of derivative ability usually appears in witches whose main ability will bring danger to themselves, so there are many records of it. It usually expands into a cocoon and wraps the witch in it, while keeping the environment inside the cocoon at its normal state. However, maintaining it requires a lot of magic power, and the greater the difference between the inside and outside environment, the faster the magic power consumption. In other words, The reason why Lightning used up her magic power in a short time was not because of flying, but because of her derivative ability. Vendi asked. Chapter 1022. But my magic power can continue to grow through practice, and there's no limit to the number of times I can advance, right? Lightning did not look frustrated at all. That's great. It's exciting to be able to surpass one's own limits. Also, I can be considered as half a combat witch now. Maggie echoed with her head held high. I know you're happy, but remember not to speed up over the castle and cause trouble for His Majesty next time. Vendi coughed twice. Also, you have to save your magic power for the next few days until all the tests are completed. Do you understand? Yes, Sister Vendi. Lightning playfully stuck out her tongue. Roland had a different opinion. Although supersonic flight could give Lightning unparalleled mobility, once she ran out of magic power, she could easily fall into a desperate situation. Moreover, Lightning was much smaller than an airplane, so it was still unknown how much damage she could cause to the demons when she broke through the sound barrier. It was obviously not cost-effective to use her as a combat witch. As for the magic slayer who could disrupt magic power in a wide range, he was even more of a nemesis to her. What Roland cared more about was the time she could last at subsonic speed. In this era, a speed of 800 or 900 kilometers per hour was definitely a speed that left others in the dust. Whether it was to explore the map or to serve as a scout, it was much more efficient than a simple battle to cover up the battlefield's blind spots outside Sylvie's detection range. Just as Lightning was about to leave, Roland suddenly stopped her. By the way, I have one more question for you. He considered his words carefully. If, after more than 10 years, there are no more dangers to explore in this world, what will you do? No. Dangers to explore? Lightning was slightly startled. For example, every continent has been set foot on, every sea is recorded in detail, the entire world is visible, and there is no place that can be called unknown. It may sound unbelievable, but if that were to happen, would you still want to be an explorer? I see. The little girl suddenly understood. You mean, what if the explorers at the fjords explore the land and the sea during the battle of divine will? What should I do? You can understand it that way. Roland couldn't help but curse inwardly. He had already said it tactfully enough, but the other party still hit the nail on the head. Sure enough, people of the same trade were the biggest enemies. Unless every one of them is as powerful as my father. But even so, I will continue to explore, Lightning said without hesitation, because there are some places that only I can reach. Even my father can't do it. You mean? Lightning pointed to the top of her head and said confidently, there's still a big blank space in the sky. It wasn't until she left that Roland couldn't help but laugh. Should he say that they were indeed father and daughter? Her reply was not only similar to Thunder's, but it was even more imposing. He did not know if the fate of an explorer would be as Thunder had said, but he was right about one thing. In terms of talent, Lightning was indeed at a level that ordinary people could not reach. What are you laughing at? Nightingale asked curiously. He stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and looked at the cloudy sky. His eyes seemed to penetrate the clouds and reach a deeper place. Although it was still elusive, someone was already watching it. I'm laughing, how good it is to be young, he sighed. After dealing with Lightning's matter, Roland asked Vendi to stay. I plan to add a new department to the city hall. He went straight to the point. In addition to handling emergencies like today's, it can also provide a credible channel for the public to discuss. You mean, it's mainly used to release information? Vendi asked. Yes, this department will be called the Publicity Department. Roland nodded. But the way it releases information is a little different. First of all, unless it's an emergency, it won't make an announcement through the bulletin board in the central square. Second, it won't be limited to Neverwinter. It will also include some novel events that happened in other places. If we don't publicize it in the central square, how will we let people know? Nightingale curled her lips. Roland picked up a piece of scrap paper from the table and unfolded it in front of the two. So it needs a new means of publicity, The newspaper. In fact, setting up a bulletin board in the central square and sending people to repeatedly publicize it was a last resort. In the early days, the literacy rate was extremely low, so it was impossible to have all the people read. Under such circumstances, word of mouth became the only way to publicize the decree. However, with the rapid expansion of the city's population and the rapid expansion of the territory, this method could no longer keep up with the actual needs of the people. In the past, gathering 3,000 people to make a speech was equivalent to informing the whole city. Now, to meet the same proportion, at least 80,000 to 90,000 people had to be gathered. Not only did this exceed the capacity of the central square, but it would also cause the industrial operations of Neverwinter to come to a halt due to such a large number of people. Barev's report made him realize that the saying, "If you don't occupy the propaganda position, the enemy will occupy it," was not just a saying. Without a reliable channel of discussion, all kinds of rumors would ferment in the taverns, and when they spread, it would be difficult to reverse them. Now that the universal primary education had been carried out for 2.5 years, the resources at Neverwinter's disposal were much more abundant than in the past, so it was only natural to start a newspaper. If the former was the foundation of running a newspaper, then the latter was a strong guarantee of the newspaper's circulation. What did an official newspaper need? In order to maximize the circulation and timely report that could guide public opinion, Neverwinter needed a large amount of paper and efficient printing technology. The problem of paper was easy to solve. In the developed central and eastern cities, paper had been popularized among the middle and upper-class families. He still remembered that Lucia's late parents used to run a paper mill in Valencia. According to the statistics of City Hall, among the immigrants from the eastern region, there were many craftsmen who had mastered papermaking technology. As long as he recruited those craftsmen and expanded the production capacity, he would be able to meet the demand for a large number of publications. For Neverwinter, any problem that could be solved with money was not a problem at all. Printing was even easier. Metal type and roller were all mature technologies, and the ink was provided by Dark Cloud. In theory, it was easier than papermaking. However, he did not need to explain all these to Vendy in detail. Putting aside the technical aspect, the newspaper had to be written by people, so the most important thing was to find people who could collect information. Roland asked Vendy to stay because he wanted her to pick a few suitable candidates. Whether it was the Witch Union or the Sleeping Spell, she should be the one who knew the abilities of the sisters the best. "I think I understand." After listening to Roland's explanation, Wendy thought for a moment and said, "So you need a witch to participate in this matter, and she can not only find out the incident in the first place, but also run faster than anyone else and send the news back to the publicity department as soon as possible." Ahem, it's not necessary to run fast. He almost choked on his saliva. As long as she knows where the incident happened, she can send someone else. Chapter 1023. Honey was very happy to be called into the office. As soon as she entered, she looked around the mahogany table as if trying to see through it. "What's wrong?" Roland asked curiously. "Is there anything special about this table? Did you put a treasure in it?" Honey even came close to the table and sniffed it. "Or does it have other functions, such as automatically heating up at night? How is that possible?" He laughed. "This is just an ordinary desk, and there are only documents and official letters in it." "Oh really?" Honey asked suspiciously. "Then why does Sister Nightingale lie at the table for a long time every night?" "Why what?" Roland and Vendy were stunned, while Nightingale bounced up from the recliner. "When I trained Gray Hair, he told me, although he could only express it with his movements." Honey replied solemnly. "Sister Nightingale always sits in your seat when no one is around, and puts her face on the table." "Oh." Before she could finish, Nightingale flashed over and covered her mouth tightly. I was just a little sleepy, so I leaned against the table for a while. Besides, how could a bird know what I was doing?" "You've completely misunderstood its meaning." Vendy held her forehead helplessly. Ahem, Roland coughed twice. "Maybe Gray Hair saw it wrong? After all, it's dark at night." Honey mumbled in Nightingale's palm, "Gray hair is an owl." There was a brief silence in the office. "Anyway, just pretend that you saw it wrong." Roland cleared his throat and waved at Nightingale, whose face was flushed. The latter stamped her feet and directly disappeared into the fog, completely hiding herself. It seemed that she would not show up for a while. "Really? I see." Honey did not ask further. "If a table can heat up, I would have wanted one." But Roland raised his eyebrows. "Isn't there heating in the castle and the witch building? But there's no one in the garden. If Sister Leaf isn't there, it's hard to warm up there. Recently, Gray Hair and the others don't want to move. I'm afraid that they'll catch a cold, so I built a platform under the olive tree and hugged them to sleep. If the tables could be warmed, they would be more comfortable." Was that why she was so interested in his desk? Roland noticed that Honey's fluffy curly hair still had a few feathers stuck to it. At first glance, it looked like an untended grass nest. He found that he had indeed neglected the living environment of those animal messengers. He subconsciously thought that they had the ability to adapt to nature, but he did not consider that letting them move in the wind and snow during the months of demons was already against the laws of nature. "Although the table can't heat up, I'll have someone build a fireplace in the garden." He smiled and gestured. "It's about the size of a bed and can gather all the animals you train together. What do you think?" "Really?" Honey's eyes lit up. "Thank you." "It's nothing. But can you really talk to them?" Honey scratched her head in embarrassment. "In fact, as Sister Nightingale said, most animals can't speak, so they can only imitate what they see with simple movements. It's common for them to guess wrong, so it can't be counted as a real conversation." So that's how it is, Roland thought. Although magic can make tamed birds and beasts obey Honey, it can't give them human-like intelligence and turn them into another species. What if you just let them find something interesting and then tell you where to go? Something interesting? Honey showed a thoughtful look. Just as Roland was thinking about how to explain the meaning of the word news, she suddenly said, "Sister Vendi and Teacher Scroll often get together to drink. Whenever they get drunk, they lie on the balcony and sing. Is that interesting?" "There's such a thing?" Roland could not help but be surprised. As the head of the Witch Union, Vendi was gentle and kind, and always gave people a feeling of a spring breeze. As for Scroll, as the Minister of Education and also the teacher of the primary course for witches, she was full of patience and intellectual beauty. Although she usually did not smile, she was very attentive to the witches in the Witch Union. It was really hard for him to imagine that these two would also get drunk, and according to Honey, it seemed that it was more than once. "Why have I never heard them sing?" "Because they usually only meet when you are on the battlefield. After all, when Sister Nightingale is not there, it is convenient for them to drink her drinks," said Honey. "Besides, they don't just sing. Green Tail told me that sometimes they also talk about you." This time it was Vendi's turn to cover her mouth. "I'm just happy for your Majesty's achievements. Besides, she also said that birds can't talk, so how can they understand what we are talking about? Green Tail is a parrot," Honey said with puffed cheeks. Seeing that the room was about to fall into silence again, Roland quickly stood up and said, "Well, this is indeed an unusual and interesting thing. You pass." "Pass?" Honey asked in confusion. "Wait, Your Majesty, I suddenly feel that it may not be suitable for her to be the center of the publicity department." Vendi coughed. "Rest assured, all the articles will eventually be reviewed before being published. Besides, the content of the newspaper is mainly about the public affairs, and there won't be too many involving witches," Roland said decisively. "Besides, ordinary people can't enter the castle district, so you don't have to worry about this. After all, only her animal messengers can quickly obtain news from all over the world. Your Majesty, may I know what exactly you are talking about?" Honey raised her hand and shouted. "Of course." Roland held back his laughter and tempted her step by step. "This is a very interesting job. Come to me, and I'll explain it to you in detail." Now that he had established the information center and finalized the technology to run the newspaper, the next step was to recruit staff and establish an interview writing system. Barav was undoubtedly the most suitable person to be responsible for this part of the work. As for the position of the minister, he decided to temporarily take it on himself. Considering the degree of acceptance of the public, the newspaper would initially only be published in Neverwinter once a week. In addition to the major events that happened in various places, there would also be some pages to record civil news and trivia. Coupled with the official background of the city hall, Roland believed that it would soon become the most credible publicity channel, which would greatly improve the current lack of publicity. At the same time, it would also provide rich topics for the public in the tavern to talk about, thereby squeezing out the gossip from the market. However, these were only the things that were recorded on the surface. What he was more interested in was the second half of what Honey had to say when she was stopped. Of course, he did not have to be in a hurry. If he became the minister, he could summon Honey alone in the future and ask her about the secret and interesting things. For example, what on earth did Vendi and Scroll talk about when they were drunk? Chapter 1024. Victor sat in a private room of a tavern in Neverwinter, looking through the recent trade bills. Unlike the noisy hall downstairs, this was undoubtedly a high-end room. The floor was covered with a woolen carpet, and there was a fireplace under the soft couch. From the moment he entered the room to the moment he laid down, his feet would not feel cold at all. According to his request, the innkeeper also added a movable wooden table next to the couch. It would not hinder him from resting, and it could be used as a short table when needed. Especially in the winter when the wind and snow were howling, it was a kind of enjoyment to do business while sitting on the couch. At this moment, there was a plate of golden chicken breast slices on his left, and a cup of dark purple chaos drink on his right. Regardless of the taste, this meal alone was worth 10 golden dragon. As a jewelry merchant on the surface, but in fact, he was the fourth son of the Lothar family. These expenses, which were considered huge in the eyes of ordinary people, were nothing to him. Spending a sum of golden dragon to let himself enjoy the comfort brought by wealth had become a subconscious action, and he did not consider whether it was worth it or not. Since 2 months ago, after visiting the first show of the giant machine called Train, he bought a room on the 3rd floor of this tavern and made it his business base. Of course, with his wealth, it was not difficult to buy 1 or 2 properties, but Victor preferred this kind of feeling, being in a tranquil and yet able to feel the hustle and bustle of the lower level. Compared with the traditional big houses favored by the nobles, he always yearned for places like taverns. It was not only for the convenience of business negotiations with various caravans. If there was anything that could directly reflect the vitality and prosperity of a city, then it must be the taverns located in the downtown area. After turning the last page, Victor closed the sheepskin book in his hand and picked up the crystal-clear drink. Under the illumination of the candlelight, the purplish-red liquid was like a beautiful gem. Recently, there was a little trouble with the bill. That was, he had not received raw gemstones in the western region for a long time. The battle for the throne had changed the situation in Grey Castle greatly. The city had been destroyed by the flames of war, and the nobles no longer had their own fiefs. These changes had caused the prices of luxury goods to fall again and again. If they wanted to maintain their original profits, they had to increase their sales. But if there were no raw stones, the jewelry craftsmen under him would not be able to produce gems. Longsong's stronghold used to be a large source of raw stones for him, but after Roland Wimbledon announced the establishment of Neverwinter, the source of raw stones became increasingly scarce. He had visited the Longsong area several times and found that all the mines there had been taken over by the young king. This was not surprising, as it was the nature of a lord to amass wealth. What was strange was that the mines seemed to disappear into thin air after they were transported to the border area. Yes, he had not found a single jewelry store in Neverwinter. They could either sell the raw stones for a profit or invest a sum of money to make gems for a profit. There were only 2 ways for a lord to do this. If it was the former, he could earn the price difference, and if it was the latter, he could work together to sell. Whether it was the sales channel or the further processing into jewelry, he had the strength that the other party could not refuse. But the king did not even leave him a way to intervene. It was as if Roland Wimbledon did not intend to make money with gems at all. This made Victor a little distressed. He had also tried to sell the jewelry he made in Neverwinter, but the result was the same. No commoner in any place could afford such expensive goods that cost dozens of golden dragon. They had always been supplied to the rich aristocratic families to satisfy their need to show off and compare at banquets. But there was no aristocracy in the traditional sense here. That's right, for such a huge new city to have no interest in jewelry, this was something he had not expected. He had come to Neverwinter many times, but he had only bought goods here and rarely sold them. The accounts in the sheepskin book were one-sided. This was undoubtedly an unhealthy sign. The appearance of the train had made Victor realize that the future had come, but it was not evenly distributed. In order to better expand his business, he naturally had to go to the place that was closest to the future. It was also an inevitable choice for him to shift the focus of his business from the old king's city to the new king's city. The problem was, what should he do without this industry in the future? He was not short of money. Even if he did nothing, he could still enjoy a rich life. But he had to prove his ability in the trade, so that those businessmen who coveted his family and black money would be speechless. He could not let his father down. Just as Victor was thinking about how to solve this problem, the noise downstairs suddenly became several times louder, and even the floor trembled slightly. It was still early, so it should not be the time for the drinkers to enjoy themselves. Did something happen? He pulled the bell to call the maid. "Excuse me." Soon, a beautiful woman pushed the door open and walked in. "What can I do for you?" The moment the door opened, the noise suddenly became louder. He seemed to hear someone reading something loudly. Victor pointed outside the door. "What's going on downstairs?" "Sorry, sir. Did they disturb you?" The maid smiled apologetically. "It can't be helped. After all, today is the day the newspaper is on sale. Everyone is rushing to buy it." "Newspaper?" he repeated awkwardly. "Yes, His Majesty issued an announcement a week ago, saying that it will replace the bulletin board in the square. Everyone has been looking forward to it for a long time. They all want to see what the newspaper is." "Oh, another new thing." As expected of the new king's city. Victor suddenly became interested. "How much is it? I heard that one copy is 10 bronze royals." "Buy one." "No, buy 10 copies for me too," he said immediately. Not long after the maidservant ran down the stairs, she quickly ran back, panting, My lord, all the newspapers that were delivered have been sold out." "So fast?" Victor blinked in surprise. If it was a commodity, it was too easy to sell. But this was not a problem for him at all. It was just throwing money. Then buy it from the people who bought it. Money is not a problem. He threw a golden dragon into the maid's arms. "As long as you can buy it, the rest is yours." "Yes, sir." "Milord," the girl said with a smile. Half a quarter of an hour later, 6 stacks of gray newspapers were handed to him. "The price below has risen to 20 silver royals." "I've tried my best." The maid stammered. Is she raising the price because someone is buying a lot? The maid's expression clearly revealed her inner thoughts. Although she did not complete the task, she was reluctant to hand over the rest of the money. Victor did not care. "What's your name?" "Linglong, sir." "Keep the money." He waved the newspaper in his hand. "By the way, can you read this with me?" Since he already had good food and wine, what he lacked was self-evident. The maid's chest was heaving up and down, and the fine sweat on the tip of her nose exuded a youthful aura. Roland had seen many noble women, and this slightly clumsy girl had a unique flavor. Moreover, she was a resident of Neverwinter. If there was anything he did not understand, he could ask her. "Sir Victor." The maid lowered her head, blushing. After a while, she bit her lip, nodded and replied in a low voice, "I do." Chapter 1025. With one more person on the couch, the cushion suddenly bent a lot and made a soft creaking sound. "It seems that I have to remind the innkeeper to strengthen this thing," Victor thought. Although the big bed was placed in the corner of the room, Sometimes not everything could be done on the bed. Changing places often brought unexpected beauty. Compared to the two king cities, the tavern here was still lacking in heritage. After a while, Tinkle had cleaned up the drinks and spread the newspaper in front of him. This is... Victor could not help but raise his eyebrows. He saw that the paper was neatly covered with small words, just like the ancient books in his house. Since he was young, he had thought that his vision was extraordinary. Not only had he seen most of the strange things in the world, but he had even played with them himself. Usually, when a product was placed in front of him, he could roughly estimate its value. However, this thing made Victor hesitate. Such neat and detailed handwriting was unlikely to have been written by hand. In other words, it was highly likely that it had been imprinted. Considering the cost of the latter, the creator would usually only use it on important and rarely modified files and classics, such as the kingdom's code of law. This was where the problem lay. In order to achieve the best effect, these kinds of books would use the best materials possible. Unshaven lamb skin was only a basic requirement. Many of the covers were inlaid with gold and jewels. This was to highlight the extraordinariness of the book and ensure its durability. But what was this newspaper? The paper was obviously ordinary gray papyrus. It was of different thickness and melted when it touched water. It had no cover and the corners were not protected. Even if it was read normally, it could not be read more than a few times. To him, this was like stuffing a luminous pearl into an iron ingot. Victor could not help but think of what the maid had said before. The king intended to use this thing to replace the announcement. Did that mean that it would print new content in the future? After asking the question in his heart, he got an affirmative answer from the maid. Yes, the announcement said that the newspaper would be published every other week, and the number would only increase. It was guaranteed that most people would be able to read it. And one copy only cost 10 bronze royals. He began to doubt how much wealth His Majesty had plundered from Hermes. How could His Majesty want to continue doing this for a long time when he would lose money every time he made a fortune? The gemstone merchants who had previously thought that there might be a business opportunity here had now completely dispelled the idea. Who cares? Victor muttered to himself. I'm not spending my money anyway. What does it have to do with me whether the other party wins or loses? It was better to concentrate on reading the newspaper. With this in mind, he shifted his gaze to the first page. At the top of the page was a bold headline, Grey Castle Weekly. The following pages were about the king's ascension to the throne and the alliance between the Kingdom of Dawn and Grey Castle to fight against the demons. He had already heard about these things, but he only knew that there were such things. After just 2 lines, Victor was completely immersed in it. The content made him feel like he was holding his breath. It was the first time he had seen such a detailed description of these 2 major events from the perspective of the higher-ups. Different from the rumors circulating on the streets, the records in the newspaper not only contained the precise time and place, cause, process, and result, but also elaborated on the reasons for their occurrence. Especially the part about the alliance between the Kingdom of Dawn and the Kingdom of Dawn, the betrayal of the Moya royal family, the rebellion of the nobles, and the letter for help that was sent from thousands of miles away. All of these eventually formed the reason for Grey Castle to send troops. After that, the 3 big families changed sides, and the new King of Dawn was willing to rebuild the kingdom with Roland Wimbledon as the leader. Although he knew that these descriptions were not necessarily true, he found himself unconsciously wanting to believe them, for no other reason than that the content was so complete and seamless that it was hard not to believe it. In fact, the fact that the other party dared to put these things in front of him was already convincing enough. For a moment, Victor ignored the existence of Tinkle and could not wait to turn to the next page. The content of the second page was actually related to the demons. The author had written a complete record of the First Army's expedition to the Northwest Wasteland before the beginning of winter and their attack on the demons, using days as units. This was the first time he had heard of this news. When he came back to Neverwinter last time, he only knew that there were devil beasts attacking the border, but he did not expect that the king would retaliate for this. Not only did the king go deep into the rumored dangerous forbidden land, but he also dealt a heavy blow to the demons, so that they did not dare to easily appear in the western region anymore. If the record was true, this could almost be described as legendary. How could such a thing happen? This was the thought that came to Victor's mind the most. Whether it was the long-distance raid in the past half a month or the life-and-death battle 10 kilometers away, both were thrilling. When he saw the army forming a defensive position to resist the waves of enemies from the sky, he even felt a chill run down his spine. Since he had been exposed to black money since he was a child, he knew better than most people that this world was not as simple as people thought. In the dark, there were many hidden forces that did not know their place. Therefore, when the news of the demon's appearance reached the Kingdom of Dawn, he was not too surprised. The leaders of the Chamber of Commerce were probably the same. But that was all. The nobles and merchants of the Kingdom of Dawn still focused on their own interests and did not care about the battle of divine will, which was only on paper. Victor never expected that Grey Castle would have a head-on conflict with them and even win. This gave him an inexplicable feeling. He could not tell what it was, but it made him feel at ease and happy. This matter should not have had anything to do with him. After thinking about it, he guessed that the word human, which appeared many times in the newspaper, had influenced him. For a moment, Victor felt that he was on the same side as the first army of Grey Castle. In the face of the terrifying and powerful alien race, the barrier between the family and the bloodline seemed to have faded a lot. He took a deep breath, licked his slightly dry lips, and turned to the third page. The content of this piece of paper was much more relaxed. It was all about the trivial things that happened in Neverwinter, and the titles were also quite novel. For example, shocking. Where did the late-night explosion in the city come from? The detective group will uncover the mystery. Water pipes cracked, and the road became a skating rink. The bird beak mushroom cooking guide that Neverwinter people must know, and so on. Victor continued to read. When he flipped to the back of the newspaper, he was suddenly stunned. It was a black and white painting that took up half of the page. The scenery in it was so vivid that it was difficult to look away. Two women were holding hands and standing quietly on the snowfield. Together with the fluttering snow, they were incomparably beautiful. Below the painting was a row of beautiful words. Chapter 1026. What's this? Victor pointed at the picture and asked, "Is it a new play?" Tinkle leaned over and glanced at the newspaper. "No, sir, this picture should be referring to the magic movie." Magic movie? It was another term that he had never heard of. It was great to be in the future. The jewelry merchant could not wait to ask, "Can you explain it to me in detail?" The maid was a little embarrassed. "Well, I'm not sure. A few days ago, the same picture was hung in the central square, but it was colored. I heard that the magic movie is a new kind of performance and even requires a special stage to watch it. An art that transcends the times? How confident the King of Grey Castle is to use such a word to describe it." Victor stroked the slightly rough paper and thought, "It seems that this thing is really worth looking forward to." He noticed that there were a few lines of smaller words below the big words, which stated the time and place of the performance and the way to buy tickets. Then Victor's heart skipped a beat. Wait, the ticket costs 40 golden dragon? Did I read it wrong? This is more than the price of the top theatrical troupe in the city of Glow. It was not that he could not afford it, but why would anyone in a city where no one even cared about jewelry would be willing to pay for a magic movie? No, there's more. Victor frowned and continued to read. At the same time, he could not help but read in his heart, if you have a Neverwinter ID card, you can get a special discount. You can book the Neverwinter Hotel for only 25 silver royals. Note, the original price is better, but the number of times is limited. First come, first served. Expired tickets are not available. Drinks and food are not provided in the special price tickets, so please be prepared in advance. This is really a world of difference. The jewelry merchant had seen a product with two prices, but the difference was usually not too big. After all, the cost was still there. Moreover, most of these transactions were carried out in private and would not be made public. Otherwise, the person who spent more money would definitely complain, and it would be difficult to do business with the other party in the future. What Neverwinter did was an eye-opener for him. Not only was it written on the paper, but it also set up many restrictions, as if those who wanted to pay more had to fight for it. However, he found that he had become one of the people who were rushing to come. Roland had to admit that this kind of selling method did have a strange attraction. Those who could afford 40 golden dragons were at least big merchants or aristocratic families. Being able to attend the auction was already a proof of strength, not to mention that he was full of curiosity about the magic movie. Without another word, Victor jumped off the soft couch and put on his wolf-skin coat. "Milord?" Ling Long whispered. She was obviously prepared. She was only left with a thin veil. At this moment, she was nestled in the bedding and looked at him helplessly. Victor picked up the clothes that the maid had taken off from the ground and threw them into her arms. "Where are the pre-orders for the magic movie? Take me there now." The shooting of The Legend of Wolfheart was in its final stages. Princess Tilly was about to have the final battle with the demon lord in the palace. Roland had given up the entire first floor of the castle for the film crew to shoot the scene. May, the star of the West, was now the main person in charge of the magic movie. In order to achieve the best effect in the new movie, she even gave up her role and devoted herself to rehearsal and directing. Cut! When Lorgar kicked down the castle gate and rushed into the hall, May shouted the stop command. "Very good. That's all for today. Thank you for your hard work." "Teacher, you've worked hard too," the troop members replied in unison. In the past, she would have rolled her eyes at them. But now, she just smiled and nodded. This is probably the tempering of time, May thought. I've really changed a lot after moving to the border area. Be careful of the wood chips on the ground. Carter Lannis, who was guarding by the side, immediately came over. Do you want me to carry you there? Everyone is watching, May said grumpily. Her husband's temper was impeccable, but his words and actions were not like an upright knight. She did not know what His Majesty saw in him that made him the chief knight. I can walk by myself. Then I'll walk in front of you. Carter stepped in front of her and swept a path for her with his foot. His tall figure immediately blocked out the light shining in from the courtyard. This made May involuntarily raise the corner of her mouth. But she knew that she could not let him find out. Otherwise, it would only make him more arrogant, and she would eventually get herself into trouble at night. Are you ready for tomorrow's performance? Don't forget your lines when Miss Lorgar beats you up. Speaking of the play, Carter's face immediately turned bitter. Can you ask her to be gentle when she hits me? Last time in the snow, I almost threw up the food in my stomach. She's as strong as ashes after she turns into a wolf. They're both monsters. You know what? Only actors submit to the play, not the play. Besides, the magic movie is much more realistic than the play. May covered her mouth and said, so the solution is very simple. Don't eat too much before tomorrow's shooting. The chief knight did not know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and changed the topic. By the way, guess who I saw at the dock today? Well, your former lover? May shrugged. No way. Carter hurriedly turned around and said, it's Cajun Fells. May could not help but stop and asked, really? Of course. He's a celebrity in the King's City. How could I be wrong? Noticing the change in Lin Sanjiu's eyes, Carter grinned and said, and he disembarked with a large group of people. I think they're his acting team. Many people recognized Mr. Cajun at that time. The dock was almost blocked. What do you think? Is this news worth a kiss? It's worth it, May said without hesitation. I want to visit him. Cajun Fells was almost a representative of the play. Since he first appeared on the stage, he had conquered almost all the audiences in the past 30 years. From the southern region to the northern region, no actor who wanted to reach the top could avoid him. Over 50 years old, Cajun could no longer be active on the stage. So he moved from the front of the stage to the backstage and specialized in playwriting. Today, he still had a great influence in the theater industry. When May went to the King's City to perform, it was through his play, The Story of a Prince's Search for Love, that she stood in front of everyone. Without Cajun Fells's guidance and praise, she would not have become the real star of the Western region. At least, she would not have been recognized by the public so quickly. I knew you would say that. Carter handed her a note. I've asked about the hotel they're staying in, but I have to supervise the craftsman to replace the gate. I won't be able to go with you. Thank you. May happily took the note and said, It doesn't matter. I'll call the people in the troupe. Then she looked at the members of the troupe who were still cleaning up the set and props in the castle, and called out names in one breath. Irene, Tina, Rosia, Gate, Swallow. Come here. Yes, Master Cajun must have come for the king's coronation ceremony. When Wimbledon 3 was crowned, it was his continuous performances that pushed the ceremony to its climax. Although he no longer appeared on the stage, the Cajun troupe he led was still the top troupe in Grey Castle. For example, Rentgen, Igripo. They were all talented actors with different styles. If Irene and the others could receive their guidance, it would definitely be a great help to their acting career. As expected, when they heard that they were going to visit Cajun Fells, they could not help but exclaim. Gate was so excited that he stammered, Can we really meet Cajun? I think it should be okay, May said, spreading out her hands. But you have to work harder in the future so that you won't waste this opportunity. I'll work harder to improve my acting skills. Tina's eyes lit up. Then let's go. They first went to the convenience market to buy some souvenirs as gifts. Then they hurried to the Whistling Hotel, where they would be staying. Many people had already gathered in the tavern on the first floor. When they saw May and the others, they made way for them. Obviously, they had a good impression of the Star Flower Troupe. Some of them even took out a pen and paper, as if they were going to record the first meeting between the two troupes. There was no doubt that those who carried such things with them were the note-takers of the publicity department. However, to May's surprise, the manager in charge of reception quickly walked down the stairs with a cold face. Chapter 1027. The noise at the scene suddenly froze. Even the tourists around the bar counter put down the wine glasses in their hands and looked at the people of the troupe. May was stunned. When I was in the old king's city, Mr. Cajun gave him advice, right? That's why he doesn't want to see you, the steward said in a low voice. Mr. Cajun is very disappointed in you, Miss May. Although these words were spoken in her ear, but her companions were still able to hear the other side's reply, May felt her own hand was instantly grasped tightly by Irene. This statement was even harsher than an accusation, especially when it came from the mouth of a master dramatist. When it came to the younger generation, their rebuke could be either criticism or encouragement because they had high hopes for them. However, disappointment was a completely different matter. 3 years ago, Lin Sanjiu would have been at a loss and even burst into tears. But now, the first person she thought of was not herself. She had been the star of the Western region for many years and was the backbone of the Star Flower Troupe. She was very confident in her acting skills and abilities. If even she was dealt a heavy blow, what would happen to Erin, Tina, and the others? Not to mention Yenzi, who was talented but lacked confidence. Therefore, May found herself surprisingly calm. She exhaled softly and replied methodically, Is that so? I think there might be some misunderstanding. It would be best if you can explain it to him face to face. If not, I have to apologize. The steward did not expect that Lin Sanjiu would respond so casually. He could not help but frown. Anyway, I hope Mr. Cajun can make further progress in the theater and make a breakthrough in the ceremony. We won't bother you any longer. Lin Sanjiu took 2 steps forward and turned around. By the way, please don't call me Miss May. I'm Mrs. Lannis now. On the way back, the weather did not change, but May felt the sky was much gloomier. They were silent and no longer as lively and excited as when they first set off. When they were about to leave, Gate could not help but ask, Lady May, did you and Master Cajun really? Fool, what nonsense are you saying? Luo Xia fiercely glared at him. If Sister May really had a grudge with him before, why would she take the initiative to visit him? Isn't that just asking for trouble? What disappointment. I think you're just jealous. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at her in disbelief. The person you're talking about is the master of drama in Grey Castle. Actually, Rosia said indignantly, Neverwinter has become the new King's City, and the Starflower Troupe is the most popular troupe in the Western region. Their status has declined, so they naturally won't treat us well. I followed Sister May all the way from Longsong to Border Town. Since she came back from the old King's City, she hasn't had any contact with Cajun's troupe. How can I be disappointed? To put it bluntly, they are looking down on Starflower's short history and lack of fame in the eyes of the nobles. So that's how it is. Irene had a look of sudden realization. It was probably because of Luo Xia's righteous and confident voice that everyone regained some of their spirits. I was wondering why the steward didn't dare to look Lady May in the eye. It seems that he has a guilty conscience. So that's why Master Cajun doesn't want to see Sister May? Of course not. May could not help but roll her eyes. With his fame, why would he be jealous of me? Outside of the Western region, almost no one knows who I am, but in the whole territory of Grey Castle, even in the Kingdom of Dawn, many people have heard of the famous Cajun Fells. You guys are getting more and more ridiculous. Everyone immediately shrank their necks. Anyway, this matter ends here. Do you understand? May clapped her hands and said, Go back. We have to continue the filming tomorrow. Back at home, Carter also asked about the visit during dinner. She just brushed it off in a few words. Regardless of the reason, May did not want her husband to be involved. After all, it was just an internal conflict in the theater circle. The filming of the magic movie went smoothly in the next few days. The atmosphere that Lin Sanjiu had been worried about did not appear. On the contrary, probably because everyone was holding their breath, the final battle in the palace was exceptionally good. Even Gate performed exceptionally well and would not take a break until he was on point. The atmosphere even inspired the entire Starflower Troupe, which was an eye-opener for the newcomers. During the filming, some people even speculated that it was Master Cajun's guidance that made the actors suddenly work hard. This made May feel a little relieved. It seemed that the accident in the Whistle Hotel did not affect the troupe too much. Just when she thought that the visit was over, something unexpected happened again. One day, the steward of Cajun troupe came to her after the filming. My master wants to talk to you, May. No, Mrs. Lannis. He had been waiting outside the castle district for a long time. Even his hat was covered with a thin layer of snow. Without a doubt, he was referring to Cajun Fells, the founder of Cajun Troupe and the master of Grey Castle. At that moment, Lin Sanjiu had a lot of questions in her mind. She even wanted to reject him by saying that she was disappointed. However, she realized that she really wanted to see Cajun, for no other reason than to solve the mystery. Can I bring my friends with me? May asked. No, Cajun only allows you to go alone. The steward shook his head. Sister May. Irene said worriedly. Lin Sanjiu tilted her head and looked at Irene, indicating that she was okay. Then she took a deep breath and said, I see. Please lead the way. It was still the Whistle Hotel. May followed the steward to the second floor and entered a spacious study. Standing with their backs against the bookcase were several familiar faces: Princess, Rentgen, Bard and Prodigal, Igripo, Flying Cloud, Burness. These were all top-notch actors from all over the world. In A Prince's Search for Love, Lin Sanjiu had cooperated with them quite well. Meeting them again after so many years should have been full of joy. However, from their cold expressions, May only saw contempt and hostility. This surprised her greatly. Although she had given up hope for a warm reunion, the star of the Western region had the impression that even if there were conflicts between them, they would not show it so obviously. For famous actors, hiding their expressions was just a basic skill. Even if they were facing a newcomer, few of them would be willing to fall out with them. This was different from the busybodies of the Longsong Theater. The more famous an actor was, the more he cherished his fame. However, at this moment, they did not even want to pretend to be polite. May looked at the white-haired old man behind the desk. After several years, Cajun seemed to have aged a lot, but none of the actors present would ignore his existence. These people of the same generation didn't say anything. It was obvious that they were waiting for the drama master to speak. Cajun seemed to feel her gaze. He closed the script in his hand and stood up. His first words stunned May. Chapter 1028. Stop the performance? But the magic movie has been shot and the actors don't need to appear on the stage. No, the point is, why did he say that? May, who did not expect that Cajun would make such a request, fell into a daze. Cajun probably realized that his words were too shocking, so he quickly added, "It's not a cancellation, just a temporary suspension. For example, if he feels unwell and needs a rest, I think the officials will agree to let us meet His Majesty in a week or so." But May wanted to say that the magic movie was different from the previous plays and the Starflower Troupe would not be responsible for the performance, but as soon as she said, "But," Rentgen sneered at her. Obviously, she had been holding back for a long time. "I told you that you're wasting your time. She's the one who made this happen. How can she stop now? Teacher, you're wrong about her. I thought you just went astray and gave up the pursuit of drama. I didn't expect you to go this far." Bernice stamped her feet. "I even put in a good word for you the other day. Mrs. Lannis, what do you think drama is? A tool for you to build your reputation? If she didn't tell us, we would still be in the dark. She's the wife of Chief Knight Carter Lannis. Isn't it normal for those officials to want to please her? I don't believe that His Majesty won't give Cajun a chance to perform, considering his reputation." "Enough," Cajun Fells bellowed. "I didn't ask her to come here to listen to you quarreling. And I don't think May would do that. If you don't believe my judgment, please leave this room. I just want to hear her answer." "Oh my God." May was so surprised that she could hardly keep her mouth shut. She pieced together an incredible story from these people's sarcasm. Cajun Troupe had wanted to perform in front of His Majesty before the coronation ceremony and had submitted an application to City Hall. However, they had been unexpectedly rejected. Therefore, when Rentgen and the others learned that May had married Chief Knight Carter, they thought that May had asked the officials to reject the application and shut the company out. This was a huge misunderstanding. If things were really as she thought, then the other party's undisguised hostility could be explained. Whether it was rejection, disappointment, or even competition for roles, it was just a conflict between actors. This was very common in the theater world, and no one would unite against a common enemy because of such things. But it is quite different to use other forces to obstruct the performance of another. That is a kind of encroachment, an encroachment on the career which the performer loves. If it were her, she would probably be even more indignant and contemptuous than them. "Except for the members of the troupe who were with me that day, I didn't mention what happened in the hotel to anyone," May said slowly. "I can guarantee that. I believe that too. That's why I decided to talk to you." Cajun rubbed his forehead. "We know nothing about this new city. We don't know what the problem is. We have no choice but to do this. Of course, we will compensate you later." At the mention of compensation, Rentgen and the others frowned and looked away. May was not in the mood to care about the compensation. Based on her understanding of Cajun Fells, he must have his reasons for making such a request. "Before I answer you, I want to ask you a question." She thought for a moment and said, "Your supervisor mentioned that you were disappointed in me." But the old man was silent for a while, then he waved at the other actors. "Teacher." Rentgen seemed to want to say something, but she finally shut her mouth and left the study. The others followed her out of the study, and soon only the two of them were left in the room. Cajun Fells stared at May, and the reproach in his eyes made May want to avoid him. "How many plays have you acted in the past 2 years?" However, what Cajun Fells said surprised her. 7 or 8. May said hesitantly. "A total of 12 plays, Cajun said, counting on his fingers. Cinderella, The Witch Story, Dawn New City. Let's not talk about the plays themselves. Do you really think you can act them well?" May was stunned. "Have you seen them?" "No, that was a stupid question." She immediately realized that her plays were mainly in the Western region, and he must have heard about them from others. Sure enough, Cajun shook his head. I have students in all 4 regions of Grey Castle, so it's not difficult for me to know about them. He sighed. But when you acted in A Prince's Search for Love, it took you more than half a year and 2 months. May did not respond. She had already understood what he meant. A vivid performance was honed by a lot of time behind the scenes. This was an unbreakable law in the theater world. No matter how talented an actor was, they could not guarantee that they could memorize every line and every action in a short period of time. In fact, because she had rehearsed too many plays, she did make a lot of low-level mistakes that she had never made before. For example, she remembered the wrong lines, used the wrong expressions, and so on. These mistakes might be hard to notice in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of the picky audience, they would inevitably appear particularly abrupt. I don't know why you moved from the Longsong Theater to Bordertown and started acting in such a variety show at the same time, Cajun said in a low voice. The Lord might have ordered you to do it, but he wouldn't have forced you to do it without your own will. After all, a play is a dance in front of everyone. No one can dance with shackles. May. He did not address her as Mrs. Lannis. Instead, he used the tone he used to teach her. You should know very well that the level of the audience can help an actor improve his or her skills. Without high expectations and standards, how can you have the motivation to move forward? You do cater to most people, but you've given up the pursuit of higher acting skills. That's why I'm disappointed in you. May was unable to refute or even defend herself, because she knew that the other party was right. Judging from her acting skills, she had indeed been on the decline recently. Not only had she spent less time practicing, but she had also given up her role in The Wolf Princess. One play after another did not allow her to delve deeply into it. Supporting the Starflower troupe had also consumed a lot of her energy. After a long time, she asked, "Have you been preparing for this play for a long time?" "Exactly 2 years," Cajun said proudly. "We've been practicing it every day except for the old plays. Even on the ship and in this hotel, we haven't wasted a single moment. Every detail has been perfected. All we need is a suitable platform, and these children will be able to put on a perfect play, which is even more perfect than my previous play, Looking for Love." Chapter 1029. That was indeed the case. Cajun Fells was still the person May was familiar with. At least in terms of drama, he had a pure faith. Because of this faith, he did not hide his disappointment in her, nor did he change his words just because he needed her help. It seemed to be a natural choice for a person who truly loved drama to make room for his troupe in exchange for a perfect performance. However, she found that she could not easily say yes. Something seemed to be stopping her. May closed her eyes and faintly heard a girl's voice. "Mrs. Lannis, please wait for me. This is my token of appreciation. Please accept it." Then, someone handed a salted fish to her. At that moment, May suddenly understood what was stopping her. She opened her eyes and met the drama master's gaze. This time, she did not try to avoid the question. There were many ways to evade the question. First, he had to affirm his appreciation for the movie, then use a "but" as a turning point. Then, he could explain the nature of the magic movie and tell Roland that the movie was decided by His Majesty himself. All of these could be considered as a reasonable answer. Cajun Fells knew little about Neverwinter. He did not know the uniqueness of the Starflower troupe, nor did he understand how much His Majesty valued drama. He had been searching in the wrong direction from the beginning. If she could explain it clearly, not only could she reverse the misunderstanding, but she might even be able to redeem Master Cajun's disappointment. However, May knew that it was just another way of avoiding the question. "Mr. Cajun, is your performance just for His Majesty?" "For the nobles, ministers, and lords who came to congratulate me," Cajun said with a nod. "Without a suitable audience, no matter how wonderful the performance is, it's meaningless. Just like gold and jewels, or fine wine and jade cups, every smile and movement of an actor had its own meaning. Only a careful and dedicated appreciator could taste the difference between the excellent and the extreme. It was reasonable. Then forgive me for not being able to promise you, said May sternly, because what you are putting on is by no means a perfect play. W.H. What? The old man frowned. You haven't even seen it, so how did you come to such a conclusion? Because no matter how wonderful it is, those people are just watching from the sidelines. She felt a surge of strength in her heart. They will applaud, praise, talk about it in their leisure time, but that's all. The play is but a small part of their pleasures, and their lives would be the same without it. How can it be called perfect if it is only something that is not necessary? Cajun Fell's face darkened. To a creator, a play was like their own child. No one could accept such an evaluation. I thought you lost your way in the pursuit of fame. I didn't expect you to learn to be arrogant like everyone else. From what you said, could it be that you've seen what a perfect play looks like? I haven't seen it before, May said frankly, but I know what it should look like. Cajun stared at her, his eyes as sharp as a knife. His years of experience gave him an oppressive feeling, which was enough to make the younger generation of the theater tremble. Cajun was obviously waiting for her to explain further, which was a very easy answer to her. In other words, no matter what she said, she would not be able to satisfy him. But May did not back down. She also knew that if she said what she was going to say, she would embark on a completely different path, a path that they had never seen and could not understand. This meant that she would part ways with most of the people in the theater circle. By then, not only would they be disappointed, but they would also lose all their friendships and she would never be able to blend in with them again. It's a big price to pay, isn't it? She asked herself. Then another voice answered her. But it's worth it. May opened her mouth and said, a wonderful play should not only be an entertainment, but also an entertainment that only enters the noble's field of vision when they are free. It can carry more things and can even change the fate of others. The Witch Diaries gave the people a chance to understand the life of witches, so they could remove the stigma that didn't belong to them. Dawn, encourage people to work and say goodbye to poverty, hunger, and cold. Many people listened to this call and lived a well-off life. New City made the new immigrants accept the rules of Neverwinter in a direct way, which also made the Blackstreet Rats have no place to hide. And a hero's life. She paused and said slowly, it made a sad little girl cheer up and start a new life. I think there are many people like her who lost their loved ones in the war. No matter how many people have changed because of this, I'm happy to help them through a play. What are you trying to say? Cajun said in a low voice. You once told me that the best play is to let the audience immerse themselves in the life of the characters. But now, I want them to see their own future. May said bluntly, even if the nobles lose their jewelry and jade cups, they can find other substitutes. But my plays can fill the stomachs of most people. For the first time, Cajun did not respond to this answer. I believe the play you've prepared for 2 years must be wonderful, but the Wolf Princess that the Starflower Troupe is about to perform is also beyond my imagination. Although it only took a little more than a month to prepare and it's the first time for some of the actors to perform, it's still the best play I've ever seen. She bowed slightly and said, if you don't change your mind after watching it, I'll recommend your new play to His Majesty. After leaving the Whistling Inn, May's whole body felt comfortable, even her footsteps were a lot lighter. As soon as she walked out of the alley, she saw Carter Lannis waiting for her on the street. Why you here? May asked in surprise. Irene said you were picked up by Mr. Cajun's manager. I was a little worried, so I came here. Carter shrugged. I have to go to the convenience market to buy some food for dinner. It's on the way. Really? May glanced at him. You already knew what happened in the inn that day, didn't you? You didn't even eat a bowl of rice that day. It would be strange if I didn't know, Chief Knight said proudly. Wait. She suddenly stopped. Did you tell City Hall that Cajun troupe was going to perform? Wait. She stopped abruptly. Carter raised his eyebrows. What are you talking about? Who did I refuse to perform? May stared at him for a long time before she let out a sigh of relief. No, nothing. Hey, you're not going to tell me again? It's not important. She smiled. By the way, you haven't bought dinner yet, have you? Why? Is there something you want to eat? Well, let's have salted fish tonight. Salted fish? I thought you didn't like salted fish. You ate the fish that the girl gave you last time for days. I like it now. Can't I? May interrupted Carter and reached out her right hand. I'm just asking if you want to go. Of course. The knight took her hand without hesitation. As long as it's your request, I'll go anywhere. Chapter 1030. Finally, the day of the Wolf Princess's performance had arrived. As soon as the light shone through the window, Victor was awakened by a rustling sound. He opened his eyes and found that there was no one beside his pillow, except for a few strands of hair and the faint fragrance of a young girl. Ling Long, he said in a slightly hoarse voice. My lord, you're awake? The person who answered seemed a little flustered. Did I disturb you by moving too much? The jewel merchant got up and leaned against the headboard. He couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. The maidservant was fumbling with the way to put on the dress. She only had time to put on half of the dress, and her smooth back was completely exposed. Together with her half-covered chest, she had a unique charm that would make people want to love her. Can you not look at me like that? Ling Long said, blushing. This was a feeling that those noble ladies would never give him. Victor chuckled. All right, I won't look at you. But there's one thing you should know, you can't put it on without help. The maid was at a loss. Come here, I'll help you. He spread out his hands. But let me drink some water first. I'm so thirsty. After tying the laces, Victor casually touched the maid's waist. It's done. It suits you quite well. Don't be fooled by the flimsiness of the dress. Before the invention of telescopic straps, the servants responsible for dressing the young lady had to be tall and sturdy. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to fasten it. I see. The girl stuck out her tongue. This is the first time I've heard of it. Many things of the nobility are like that. They look good but are extremely troublesome to use. To put it simply, they're flashy but impractical. He laughed. Why, can't you wait to wear them out? No, I just wanted to get up early and get ready so that I wouldn't delay your journey. Ling Long waved her hands. I'll go get some water for you to wash up and prepare breakfast. Do I have to do groceries in this dress? Victor looked at the obviously excited maid and did not expose her. Go ahead. Freshly baked bread and fried eggs will be fine. Don't forget to have one for yourself. Yes, thank you, my lord. She bowed respectfully before leaving. And thank you for the dress, and the opportunity to watch the play. After closing the door, Victor climbed out of bed and poured himself a glass of red wine. This was another advantage of this kind of woman. As long as he gave her a little favor, he would receive great rewards and gratitude. If he gave it to a lady from a noble family, he might not even see her smile. 80 gold royals were nothing to him. It was much more interesting for two people to enjoy a play than one. This had nothing to do with generosity or love. It was just a matter of taking what they needed. The only thing he was curious about was how exciting the magic movie, which was worth 40 gold royals, would be. Teacher, do you really want to go? Rentgen looked at the neatly dressed Cajun Fells with a worried look on her face. Made it say that she would recommend your new play to His Majesty, but it could just be a cover. If she wants to use your fame to boost her own popularity, won't you be playing right into her hands if you go there? I think so too. She's not trustworthy at all now, Igripo muttered. What do you mean by recommending a new play? Does she think she can see His Majesty whenever she wants? But May's husband is the chief knight. Even if she can't see him, she can at least pass a message to him, right? Bernice said cautiously. Are you going to put in a good word for her again? Rentgen glared at her. Don't forget how she treated us. Didn't teachers say that she didn't tamper with the city hall? Who knows if she lied? That's enough. Cajun interrupted. I'm not going for this so-called recommendation. She can be arrogant, but we can't do that. Even if I don't agree with her, I have to see the play first. He snorted. How can a bunch of newbies act out a perfect story? How dare she say that? If we don't go and see it, we'll be frightened by her. Only after seeing it will we be able to better expose her, isn't it? Cajun then slapped 4 exquisite tickets on the table. So, these are not tickets, but letters of challenge. It's up to you whether you want to go or not. But remember, if you haven't seen it, don't criticize it. If you want to accept her challenge, come with me. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the entrance of the new theater was full of people. Obviously, everyone was looking forward to the long-promoted magic movie. Even though they could not afford the expensive tickets for the premiere, many people still hoped to see it through tricks. However, they were surprised to find that this theater was completely different from the ones they had seen before. It did not have a single window and looked like an upside-down bowl. Even if they pressed their faces against the wall, they would not be able to hear what was going on inside, let alone peek through the window. At the same time, it was very small. It was only a quarter of the size of the central square, no more than 15 meters in length and 1 story high. Coupled with its unadorned gray cement exterior, it was hard to believe that a play that transcended the era was about to be staged here. At this moment, Victor and Tinkle walked into the entrance of the theater with the same doubts in mind. There were many checkpoints in the corridor that only allowed one person to pass through. Only after handing over his god's stone of retaliation and his dagger could he enter. The moment they pushed the door open, their eyes suddenly lit up. Wow! Tinkle could not help exclaiming. Even Victor was surprised to find that the lighting in the theater was actually a magic stone. He had only seen such a valuable item in black money. The fact that it could be used in such a public place showed the power of the owner. Unlike the simple appearance, the interior of the theater was luxurious. For clusters of stones of lighting were hanging from the arched dome, brightly illuminating the windowless interior. Warm air gushed out from under the feet, keeping the interior in a pleasant and warm state. Rows of reclining chairs were placed in the center, about an arm's length away from each other. Therefore, the entire hall looked extraordinarily spacious and did not feel cramped at all. Victor vaguely realized that this might be the reason why the theater charged such a high price for the tickets. The spacious space brought a comfortable viewing experience, but it also resulted in a very low seating ratio. According to the number of reclining chairs, a round of performances would probably only accommodate 50 to 80 people, which was far less than any official performance. If the ticket price did not increase, it would probably be impossible to break even. But the next question followed. He looked around but could not find the stage. In the center of the hall was a thick stone pillar that was directly connected to the roof. Apart from that, there were only seats, leaving no space for performances. Chapter 1031. Victor suppressed his doubts and sat down in row 3, seat 10, according to the seat number on the ticket. You're the one from the Lothar family. Someone suddenly said. He turned his head in surprise and found that it was a woman dressed luxuriously. Unlike Tinkle, she was obviously a veteran in love and could always show her most seductive side at any time. Victor Lothar, may I know who you are? I've heard a lot about you. The woman smiled and put her hand on her chest. I'm Denise Peyton from the city of Glow in the Kingdom of Dawn. Oh, you're the eldest daughter of the Peyton family. Victor suddenly realized. I didn't expect to meet a merchant from the same city in a foreign country. I didn't expect to meet the rumored business genius here either. Denise pointed to the person beside her. Let me introduce you. This is His Excellency Yorko, the former ambassador of the Kingdom of Dawn. It was he who invited me here. Nice to meet you. Then they exchanged pleasantries. During the conversation with Yorko, Victor also got to know a group of people from the upper class of Grey Castle. As he expected, those who could enter the theater at the premiere were basically rich and respectable. For example, most of the audience sitting in the front row were people with real power in the city hall. According to Yorko, their tickets were all given by His Majesty, so they did not have to pay a single copper royal. In the middle and back rows were rich businessmen and distinguished guests from all over the world. He even saw the Grey Castle King's city troupe in the crowd. The threshold of 40 golden dragons turned the theater into a small banquet. If he could make friends with these people, the reward would be worth the ticket price. After everyone had arrived, more than 10 attendants pushed a cart out of another door and placed a strange paper bag into the groove next to the armrest of the lounge chair. "Are these for us?" Tinkle picked up a bag and looked at it curiously. The words written on it seemed to be popcorn? There are also French fries and milk, so these are for food. Victor noticed that the material of the bag marked with the word milk was quite strange. It looked like parchment but was extremely soft to the touch. It was just that its appearance was the same, so no one knew where to start. Fortunately, there was a drawing at the bottom of the words, which undoubtedly took into account the customer's first time using it. When he followed the steps in the picture and inserted a transparent tube into the top seal of the bag to suck the milk inside, he couldn't help but feel an indescribable sense of achievement. This is so interesting. Even the milk that was usually bland seemed to have become much sweeter. The warm reminder, the exquisite design, and the never-before-seen packaging. Even if it was filled with water, it could still sell for a good price. The person who designed it must be an outstanding businessman. Moreover, Victor realized that this method was not just for the sake of novelty and fun. Unlike traditional porcelain and glassware with edges and corners, these two types of bags were obviously difficult to cause harm to people. Considering the identity of the spectators, this was especially important. At the same time, the storage slot next to the chair was completely attached to the bag. Even if the paper bag was opened and placed inside, there would not be any spillage. It was hard to imagine that such a mature combination would appear on a new product for the first time. Just as Victor was about to taste the popcorn, an ethereal voice suddenly sounded from the upper part of the hall. "Welcome to the Magic Cinema in Grey Castle. The Wolf Princess is about to start. Please return to your seats and listen carefully to the rules of the movie. If you encounter any problems during the movie, please act according to the rules to avoid accidents." There was a sudden uproar in the hall because the audience could only hear the voice but could not find the speaker. First of all, the duration of the magic movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes, which is more than 2 hours and a quarter. During this period, there's no rest time and you're not allowed to leave your seats. If you need help, just pull the string of the summoning bell under your seat and wait where you are. Secondly, this will be an unprecedented viewing experience. No matter what happens, please don't panic. Please remember that it's only a special play and not a real event. If you cause any third party to suffer any damage due to your own fault, the Neverwinter Police Department will hold you responsible. Hearing this, Victor could not help but chuckle. Hey, there are people in this world who take a play seriously? They even use the word panic. It's a little like they're boasting. He took the opportunity to glance behind him. Sure enough, the faces of his fellow actors were full of sarcasm. However, Tinkle did not feel anything wrong at all. She even nervously grabbed the armrest of the recliner. Perhaps to give them some time to digest the information, the voice sounded again after a few breaths. "Then, please enjoy this dreamlike time. Now, let the show begin." As the voice fell, four clusters of magic stones of lighting slowly rose and disappeared into the dome. The hall immediately darkened. What does this mean? The light source directly affected the overall effect of the play. This was the reason why open-air theaters were so popular. If there was no light, how could the audience appreciate the details of the performance? The smile on Victor's face widened even more. He was getting more and more curious as to how he was going to clean up the mess after making it so mysterious at the beginning. However, before he could stop smiling, he was stunned in the next second. After a flash of white light, his field of vision instantly turned pitch black. This was definitely the darkest darkness he had ever seen. It was no exaggeration to say that it was an abyss. Not to mention his front, back, left and right, even the chair he was sitting on had disappeared without a trace. If it was not for the feeling under his butt, he would have jumped up. But what was even more unbelievable was that Victor found that his body was also completely hidden in the darkness. Even if he put his hand in front of his eyes, he would not be able to feel anything. He could no longer tell whether it was because it was too dark or because he had been completely deprived of his vision. The turmoil in the hall proved that he was not the only one who was surprised. The shouting and wrangling among the audience filled the air with a tense atmosphere. Panic is not just for show. If it was not for the warning at the beginning of the show, the audience would have already fallen into chaos. At this moment, a gentle light sprinkled down from above, dispersing the darkness and illuminating the hall again. However, the audience did not calm down because of this. Instead, they all gasped. "Oh my God!" Victor also widened his eyes. "What is this?" The scene in front of him was no longer in the theater, but had moved to the sky. He could hear the cold wind blowing in his ears, and he could clearly see the sky with snowflakes flying. There was nothing under his feet. He was at least 1,000 feet above the ground. The mountains and forests had turned into gray and white spots, like children's graffiti. This experience that he had never experienced before made Victor tremble all over. He almost used all his strength to hold on to the armrest and curl his body into the invisible recliner. It was as if it was the only thing that could support him. If he slipped, he would fall from the sky and not even his bones would be left. In a mountain capital in the distant north, there lived two lively and lovely princesses, and our story begins here. It was not until the narration began that he realized that he was still watching a play and not being summoned to heaven by God. There are people in this world who can take a play seriously? Victor wanted to cry but had no tears. Who would have thought that the magic movie would be like this? Chapter 1032. After the view was pulled from the sky to the ground, the breathtaking scene did not change at all. In other words, the more things reflected in the eyes, the more realistic it was. Whether it was the bustling market with people coming and going, or the magnificent inner court of the palace, everything was too much for Victor to take in. If he was not worried about causing any third-party loss, he even wanted to stand up and touch the throne with his own hands. Exclamations rose and fell in the hall. The audience seemed to have lost the ability to speak and could only express the shock in their hearts with short shouts. Any change in the scene could cause an uproar. The Princess Royal appeared. Oh! A 14-year-old wolf transformed. Wow! A foreign prince came to visit. Whoa, 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 whoa! Her ability was out of control. Lightning and thunder swept the palace into a mess. The audience was even more exclaiming, and the sound was so loud that it seemed like the floor was about to be overturned. Unlike the traditional theater that paid attention to silence and gentleness, the shouts in the magic theater never stopped from beginning to end. Victor knew that this had nothing to do with the audience's quality. It was purely to ease the extremely contradictory feelings in their hearts. They were eager to enjoy the unprecedented wonder, but they were also full of fear for the overly realistic scene. Therefore, they could only shout out. Only in this way could they know that they were not experiencing this illusion alone. There were many people around them, or sharing the shock with them. If Roland was present, he would definitely understand that this was just another form of bullet screen protection. In such a shout, the Princess Royal completely transformed into a giant wolf and threw herself into the snowfield. When her huge body passed over his head, Victor only felt that his scalp was numb, and he almost couldn't help but want to run away. But at the same time, a high-pitched song entered his ears, making him instantly calm down. All the uneasiness dissipated, replaced by strong grievances, unwillingness, relief, perseverance. Several kinds of feelings alternated, and Victor actually burst into tears for a moment. He seemed to empathize with the Princess Royal who was forced to escape. He was sad for the misunderstanding of the people, but also proud of the courage. The beautiful music and the scene transformation, and even every movement of the characters in the play intertwined. The beautiful voice made his heart boil, and the description of the lyrics was more like a portrayal of himself. In this life, who had not been misunderstood. However, most people could only choose to endure in silence. Victor's fear of the she-wolf girl was gone. Instead, he applauded her for breaking free from her shackles. Through her, he seemed to see himself far away from home. There was no doubt that this was an excellent song, but for the song and the drama to be combined so perfectly without the slightest feeling of being overpowered, this was the first time he had experienced such a sense of harmony. Judging from the applause from the audience, he was not the only one who felt it. This scene had touched everyone's heart and pushed the atmosphere in the hall to the highest point since the beginning of the performance. At that moment, Victor had already made a judgment about this new drama in his heart. There was no exaggeration in His Majesty's propaganda. This was definitely an art that surpassed the times. He lost. The moment the song started, Cajun knew that he had lost to May. It was not a personal defeat, but a complete defeat for his new play, The Wolf Princess. No matter how nice the story was, a play had to be watched by people. At first, he still had the time to wonder, how is this possible, and how did she do it? But he soon became numb. This so-called magic movie had completely subverted the common sense he had accumulated over the past decades and trampled on all the existing rules. The audience in the hall was already very picky. Although they were not as insightful as the old nobles who had immersed themselves in the entertainment industry for a long time, they were all experienced and knowledgeable, so it was not easy to impress them. However, at this moment, these people could not stop shouting, as if they were villagers who had never seen the world. But it was not their fault. If he had not tried his best to restrain himself, he would have shouted too. The new play prepared by Cajun's troupe could not have done this. If you put the two together, anyone would come to the same conclusion. The Wolf Princess was more exciting, and much more so. Can't they see the mistakes and carelessness of the actors? Of course not. But they could totally ignore these problems. Cajun knew very well that a person could only receive a limited amount of information at one time, and the magic movie provided him with a wealth of information that was almost too much for his eyes to take in. Under such circumstances, it was difficult to attract the attention of the audience even if the actors made one or two small mistakes. So this was an unfair competition? Cajun did not think so. No one knew the development of a play better than he did. The reason why famous actors preferred to work in large theaters was that the latter had enough money and could provide better costumes, props, and scenery. These were also indispensable elements of a wonderful play. His teacher had made a name for himself by putting large backdrops on the stage. His masterpiece was the invention of the detachable wooden house, which was very popular at that time. Since then, all theater troupes had tried to imitate his invention, which was how today's plays came to be. If an actor were to go on stage empty-handed, he would not think that it was a perfect performance. The layout of the scene had always been closer to realism and exquisiteness. The Starflower troupe had just done this to the extreme. Cajun relaxed when he came to this conclusion. He leaned back in the soft recliner and heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, he could focus on this rare play. Before he knew it, the story had come to an end. The darkness faded, and the chairs, pillars, and floor reappeared in front of the audience. But no one stood up and left. They seemed to be still immersed in the illusionary capital of the mountains, recalling the thrilling battle between the Wolf Princess and the Demon Lord. Cajun Fells was the first to applaud. His applause seemed to wake the audience up. Then the second, the third. More and more people raised their hands. Soon, the applause grew louder and louder, like a thunderstorm. Teacher. Cajun was applauding. Rentgen, Igripo, and the others almost burst into tears. Bernice's eyes were already filled with tears. Don't cry. The old man also felt tears welling up in his eyes. He knew what Bernice was sad about. The actors had trained hard for more than 2 years for this new play. Everyone could see how much effort and sweat they had put in, but now, all their efforts were in vain. Those who had watched the magic movie would no longer be interested in the new play. This kind of defeat, which had ended before it had even begun, would undoubtedly destroy anyone's confidence. But Cajun knew that he could not give up here. We didn't go the wrong way. Teacher, you mean? What's the most regrettable thing about a play? It's the distance. He tried to control his trembling voice and said as calmly as possible, the distance between the audience and the stage is enough to make people miss the subtle expressions of the actors. But the magic movie can make up for this. I bet that improving your acting skills will only become more and more important in the future. Perhaps a well-timed smile can make the audience hold their breath. So, this is just a temporary failure. It doesn't mean that your efforts are worthless. Cajun paused for a second and said, "Don't worry. I promise you that after we figure out how the magic movie works, we'll come back and compete with the Starflower Troupe on the same line. I think the audience will give us the right feedback. But don't cry now. Stick out your chest. It deserves our applause." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.